Chapter 789. Li Huaqing and Chun Fangqing's itinerary was very clear. There was no surprise attack, and the process was very clear. The day before their departure, the desert prison had received notices from the president's office and the prime minister's office, respectively. They would arrive at the desert prison at about 11 o'clock in the morning. No matter what the intentions of the two giants were, it was an unprecedented event for the desert prison. Xiao Mahai had begun to arrange as soon as he received the news. The conditions were limited, so the welcome ceremony would not be too grand. However, the huge prison had been cleaned several times inside and outside overnight, and it looked extremely clean and tidy. When Li Tianlan, who had been busy all night, walked out of the dormitory, the whole prison could be described as spotless. Li Tianlan glanced at it casually, twitched the corner of his mouth, and did not say much. "Your Highness." Xiao Mahai stood dozens of meters away from Li Tianlan's dormitory. When he saw Li Tianlan coming out, he trotted directly to him, wanting to say something but hesitating. "Clean up here, too." Li Tianlan nodded. "Wait for her to finish." Xiao Mahai smiled and said, "What would you like to eat in the morning, Your Highness?" "Whatever." Li Tianlan handed Xiao Mahai a cigarette. "Have you confirmed the itinerary?" "Yes. The Prime Minister and the President will arrive at the prison at about 11 o'clock." Li Tianlan's eyes narrowed, and he nodded. "Got it." The President and the Prime Minister came to the most secret prison in Zhongzhou State in person. Their sincerity could not be described too much. For Li Tianlan, this was also a great honor. At the same time, it could be seen how much the two giants expected for this conversation. The greater their expectations, the greater their disappointment after the conversation. For Li Tianlan, this conversation was almost equivalent to a war. Diplomacy before force. The President and the Prime Minister had given him enough face. If Li Tianlan did not accept it, then he would naturally face the anger and suppression from the two giants. He smoked silently for a long time. Xiao Mahai left silently, ready to find someone to clean up the nearby area. Qin Weibai, whose face was ruddy and looked cold and coquettish, pushed open the door of the dormitory and walked over, grabbing Li Tianlan's hair. "Have you packed up?" Li Tianlan smiled. Qin Weibai's face turned red, and her watery eyes glared at him fiercely. She arrived at the prison yesterday morning. After breakfast, Qin Weibai was tormented by Li Tianlan until noon. Her physical strength was almost exhausted. She slept soundly in the afternoon, and then she had a sleepless night. The entire night, the rest of the prison staff were busy cleaning up. Li Tianlan was also busy. It was not until dawn that Qin Weibai fell asleep for a while. Then she got up to tidy up the sheets and ventilate the room. Now, standing in front of Li Tianlan, her legs were limp. "I guess from today on, Emperor Dong's palace will have a hard time." Li Tianlan threw the cigarette, but on the ground, and said softly, "Yes." Qin Weibai said with a slight nasal sound. Her eyes were a little vacant and languid. "What do you think?" Li Tianlan asked. He would never agree to Li Huaqing and Chun Fangqing's request. They might not be able to do anything to him in the desert prison, but they could suppress Emperor Dong's palace at any time. Now Xianyuan City was developing very smoothly, which was based on the massive material aid and economic support of the parliament. Once this aid was interrupted, Xianyuan City would definitely be in trouble in the short term. Li Tianlan really wanted to hear Qin Weibai's thoughts. Qin Weibai took a step forward and held Li Tianlan's hand. She lowered her head, looking a little weak and wronged. "Tonight, I want to sleep tonight." She didn't have any thoughts. She really just wanted to sleep. Purely sleep. "No," Li Tianlan said in a soft voice. Qin Weibai raised Li Tianlan's hand and kissed it gently. She pouted and felt even more wronged. "I know you are still angry with me. I was wrong, okay?" It was indeed a rare sight to see a goddess acting like a spoiled child. Li Tianlan smiled and pinched Qin Weibai's face. "Let's not talk about this first. If I'm in a good mood tonight, I'll let you go. What do you want to say after Emperor Dong's palace?" "Difficulties will only last for a while." Qin Weibai's face leaned on Li Tianlan's palm and rubbed it gently. "In this regard, We can solve it after the Wang family of Beihai talks with you. If Zhongzhou State doesn't give it, we can ask the Wang family of Beihai for it. I've arranged it before I came here. The Lin clan can donate some materials to help you get through it. The most troublesome thing is those wealthy families and funds that are investing in Tiannan. The attitude of Zhongzhou State may affect their decisions. However, some wealthy families that have invested a lot will instead become our help. At that time, we can only see the specific situation and then think of a targeted way. Li Tianlan touched Qin Weibai's face unconsciously and said thoughtfully, "The Wang family of Beihai is really patient. Once the news gets out, Wang Xingxiao should be here in a week at most." Qin Weibai murmured, "Tianlan, I want to sleep a little longer." In Italos, on the huge and magnificent martial arts practice field, His Majesty, who was shrouded in starlight clouds and mist, moved his body and slowly walked down the steps of the martial arts practice field. He looked at His Majesty's back with a complicated look in his eyes. A tall and burly young man grasped the railings around the martial arts practice field tightly and looked at His Majesty's back with a complicated look in his eyes. "You can think about it. As my disciple, your realm is unstable, and the chance of you reaching the peak of the invincible realm is not big. But if you have me, at least I can give you 20% more chances." His Majesty said without turning his head. "I really want to know." The young man suddenly said, "If you don't count the one in the Lin clan, who is the top expert in the dark world now? You or Li Tianlan?" Very few invincible realm experts in the dark world were purged in the chaos of Eastern Europe. Several of the strongest invincible realm experts could not see any hope of recovery for the time being because of their serious injuries. In this state, Li Tianlan, who held the Xianyuan blade in his hand, had a kind of aura that could sweep the world. After he fought all the way through Beihai province, the dark world almost thought that he was the top expert, except for Lin Fengting. This title was undoubtedly very controversial. Some people thought so, but others denied it. But even if they denied it, they couldn't recommend anyone else who could compete with Li Tianlan. Wei Kunlun was the deputy palace master of Emperor Dong's palace and Li Tianlan's deputy. Beihai Dijiang? He was also defeated by Li Tianlan. Wang Xiaoyao didn't make a move at all, but people didn't think he was Li Tianlan's opponent. There were still two great grandmasters in East Island, especially the one from Wuji Palace, who had been ranked in the top 10 of the divine list. But compared with Li Tianlan, especially Li Tianlan who had the Xianyuan sword, people still didn't have much confidence. Jiang Guochu didn't think he was Li Tianlan's opponent either, until he met His Majesty, who looked unfathomable. This friendly competition was proposed by Jiang Guochu. The place of the competition was also very secret, and Moraid was the only audience. After breaking through the invincible realm, all the pride that Jiang Guochu had accumulated was completely wiped out in this competition. 5 minutes. From the beginning to the end, His Majesty completely suppressed Jiang Guochu. Or it could be said that he completely crushed him. He had no power to fight back. Jiang Guochu lost completely. If this was a battle of life and death, Jiang Guochu even suspected that he couldn't survive at all. The process of the competition was simple, and there was nothing exciting about it. It was a beating from start to finish. In Moraid's view, this was exactly like a father beating his son. At the beginning of the competition, Jiang Guochu immediately condensed the domain that the Jiang family of South America was proud of, which was known as the first defensive domain in the Dark World. Then His Majesty took a step and appeared in front of Jiang Guochu. The battle was completely over from that moment on. Jiang Guochu's domain was completely broken the moment His Majesty got close. Then it was time for Jiang Guochu to be beaten. Just one step had directly determined the outcome of this spar. Jiang Guochu was convinced of his defeat, but he still couldn't help but be curious. Who was stronger, Li Tianlan or the one in front of him? His Majesty's figure paused slightly. If it was Li Tianlan a year ago, he wouldn't be much stronger than you. Even with the Xianyuan sword, he wouldn't be my opponent. His Majesty slowly opened his mouth, and his voice was soft. "What about now?" Jiang Guochu asked subconsciously. "How do I know? I haven't seen him in this year." His Majesty laughed and said, "I think you should have made great progress." He was silent for a moment and continued, "I don't know how far he will go, but if there is no accident, I am not his opponent under normal circumstances. But under special circumstances, he won't be my opponent." What is a normal situation? Jiang Guichu's mouth twitched. What is a special situation? It's a normal situation to compete with you. His Majesty glanced at him and said with a faint smile, "As for the special situation, it depends on whether I'm willing to pay a moderate price." "So you can win, right?" Jiang Guichu asked. "It doesn't matter." His Majesty shook his head. "It's not the best choice to have a conflict with Li Tianlan now. Our most important goal now is the Wang family of Beihai." Jiang Guichu narrowed his eyes. "After the Wang family of Beihai, I hope you can fulfill your promise to me." "Of course." His Majesty nodded. "Take a break. The two from East Island are coming soon. Let's discuss it then." He nodded and left the martial arts practice field with Moraid. "Your Majesty is really powerful." Moraid followed His Majesty like a lackey, flattering him like a tide. His Majesty smiled and didn't say much. "Your Majesty, what do you think Wang Qinglei's choice is?" Moraid asked curiously. His Majesty gave him a choice between Beihai and Kunlun City. Wang Qinglei agreed to cooperate, but he didn't tell His Majesty what he promised. His Majesty accepted it. It can only be Kunlun City. His Majesty said blandly, "He can't give up Beihai, and he doesn't have the courage." "Kunlun City," Moraid hesitated. "So after the thing in Beihai, our goal is Kunlun City." His Majesty paused and suddenly whispered, "It feels so good." "What feeling?" Moraid was a little confused. "The feeling of standing in the center of the stage." His Majesty laughed. He patted Moraid on the shoulder. "The first 10 years were the stage for Wang Tianzong and the master of Samsara Palace. The new era is the stage for me and Li Tianlan. In the end, it will only be the stage for me. It's time for some irrelevant people to leave." Chapter 790. The helicopter roared past in the air. Li Huaqing lowered his head and quietly looked at the landscape that was gradually becoming desolate below. He suddenly asked, "What do you think of the result this time?" Opposite him, Prime Minister Chen Fanqing of Zhongzhou State was sitting quietly and reading today's new newspaper. When he heard Li Huaqing's question, he was stunned and shook his head subconsciously. After thinking for a while, he slowly said, "It's hard to say." "You don't think so?" Li Huaqing said slowly. Their private plane set off from Yuzhou today. After landing in Beijing, they went to the military area and then took a helicopter to the desert prison. Along the way, this was the first time they discussed the upcoming conversation. There's nothing to think about. He may agree or refuse. It just depends on what he wants. To be honest, his rise is so fast that it's almost a straight line. Even if he's trapped in the desert now, it doesn't affect him much. We know too little about him, so it's hard to judge his intentions. Chen Fanqing shook his head and suddenly said, "If it were Li Honghe, no. Even if Li Honghe were still alive, the success rate of our negotiation would increase a lot. Unfortunately, Senior Li died too early." Li Huaqing was silent. Li Honghe's life was absolutely open and above board. He might have owed everyone, but he had no qualms about Zhongzhou State and guarding Zhongzhou State. He was the best god of war in Zhongzhou State in the past 100 years. Even during the decline of the Li family for more than 20 years, he still guarded the border of Zhongzhou State with some old people of the Li family. He devoted the first half of his life to Zhongzhou State, and his loyalty to the country was beyond doubt. If he were still alive, they wouldn't even need to make such a big fuss about this negotiation. They just needed to get through Li Honghe's work, and the matter would be half done. But now Li Honghe had fallen, and a broken but wildly rising Li family had reappeared in Li Tianlan's hands. In general, Li Tianlan's position didn't need to be doubted. From this point of view, even the position of the Wang family of Beihai didn't need to be doubted. They were definitely on the side of Zhongzhou State. But whether it was Li Huaqing or Chen Fanqing, this was not what they wanted, or more than this. Therefore, no one could tell what Li Tianlan would choose in this negotiation. Wang Qinglei's suggestion yesterday was very interesting. Chen Fanqing suddenly said thoughtfully, "President, How much of his proposal do you think is for balance, and how much is for Beihai? Most of it should be for the sake of balance. How can he care about the North Sea now? And as long as he agrees to cooperate with us, our plan will succeed. He knew that he couldn't escape. As for his proposal, Li Huacheng paused. Chen Fangqing didn't say anything. He just quietly looked at Li Huacheng. His eyes were very calm, and there was no extra expression on his face. Li Huacheng subconsciously shifted his gaze and said faintly, "That was my original intention. We have been involved in politics and balance all our lives. With Li Qianlong's current future and status, how can it be so easy to persuade him? If he agrees to help us, he will lose something, so we must let him gain something. This little bit of benefit won't be enough to satisfy his appetite." He spoke very slowly, and towards the end, his voice became softer and softer, as if he was trying to convince Chen Fangqing. After a brief silence, Chen Fangqing softly said, "President, I can understand your approach, but I'm afraid that some comrades might not agree to it." Li Huacheng smiled. The other party's words were very euphemistic. Other comrades not only disagreed with it, but if he made his ideas public now, Chen Fangqing might support him in this matter to a limited extent, but most people in the Prince group would oppose it with all their strength. At that time, he would also suffer great pressure. Li Huacheng closed his eyes and sighed, feeling a little tired. "What about you?" he asked slowly. "I personally agree with your behavior in principle." Chen Fangqing nodded. In this kind of thing, he did not hesitate at all. As the god of war of Zhongzhou State, in more than 20 years, Gu Xingyun did not show the bearing and demeanor that Zhongzhou State should have. He is not qualified. But not too bad. Li Huacheng said, "It's still because Beihai is too sharp. Let's change it." Chen Fangqing remained calm. Li Huacheng sat there and thought for a long time before he whispered, "Prime Minister, do you think we did wrong? How can there be right or wrong in this kind of thing?" Chen Fangqing laughed. "But their existence is too dangerous, or rather, their freedom is too dangerous. Hey, for hundreds of years, Beihai province has brought us too many benefits. But the Wang family of Beihai is like a bomb that can explode at any time. No force in the world has nuclear weapons, but the Wang family of Beihai does. Such a force is enough to make any president restless. It's okay when the situation is calm, but what if it happens? It's okay when the situation is calm, but what if? No one is willing to bear this kind of danger. It's just that the Wang family of Beihai is too strong. It has been glorious for hundreds of years and has always stood at the peak. For such a long time, there have been several large-scale chaos in Beihai, but they have the Li family around them. They have always had the Li family. This may be the most successful alliance in history. Every time the Wang family of Beihai faces huge internal troubles, the Li family will stand up to protect the Wang family of Beihai and help them get through the crisis, so that many people in power can't find chance. And now, Li Huacheng shook his head. "No, not just now. You and I both know that some plans actually started more than 20 years ago. When the Li family just declined, Zhongzhou State secretly set up something against the Wang family of Beihai. But at that time, the Wang family of Beihai was still strong, but now the opportunity has come. This time, the Wang family of Beihai still has internal troubles, but no one helps them to resist external troubles. They don't have the Li family around them. Under such circumstances, I really don't want Li Tianlan and the Li family to stand by their side again. Only by controlling the Wang family of Beihai can Zhongzhou State really have no hidden worries and be really safe. Nuclear weapons are the bottom line of Beihai, but even if we take away their so-called bottom line, they are still the world's leading superpower. Why can't they figure it out?" Chen Fangqing was silent for a long time, then chuckled. "Because of the sense of security." "Sense of security?" Li Huacheng raised his eyebrows. "They have a sense of security when the nuclear weapons are in their hands, but we don't, and vice versa." Chen Fangqing said, "This kind of contradiction can't be reconciled." Li Huacheng lit a cigarette and smoked in silence. "This is not a problem we should consider. Beihai is right, and so are we. It's just that our positions are different." Chen Fangqing said, "You should think about yourself." He looked at Li Huacheng with a somewhat complicated look in his eyes. Once you want Li Tianlan to gain something, you can imagine the pressure you will bear. I will retire next year. Even if you can be re-elected, my successor may not. He wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. Finally, he said softly, you know what I mean. If that's the case, your re-election can't even protect the academics. Your reputation and even your end may not be too good. Li Huaqing nodded, flicked the ash off his cigarette, and laughed. So what? He shook his head. In this position, I am the president of Zhongzhou State. I have to do something for Zhongzhou State. He paused and continued, for Zhongzhou State. Chapter 791. The plane sped through the air. The documents clattered in his hands. Wang Xingxiao lowered his head and quickly flipped through the documents. His expressionless face tightened, and his eyes were dignified and serious. The documents in his hands were very thick, page by page. A large number of economic data and public opinion surveys were listed, as well as analysis of the future. From time to time, some weird-looking graph appeared in the dense text. Wang Xingxiao looked at it quietly, without saying a word. Compared to Li Tianlan, or even compared to any other young man of his generation, Wang Xingxiao had a brilliance that others could not hide. Li Tianlan had a talent for martial arts that Wang Xingxiao could not reach, but Wang Xingxiao also had a view of the overall situation that Li Tianlan could not match at this stage. The environment he grew up in had already determined what kind of position he would stand in the future and what kind of vision he would have in the future. Whether in the judgment of the overall situation or the handling of daily affairs, his actions were natural and familiar. During the 1 year in charge of the Wang family of Beihai, all of Wang Shengxiao's actions might not be said to be brilliant and bold, but they were absolutely stable. His grasp of the family's affairs, his attitude toward the enemy, his measures in Beihai, his understanding of Zhongzhou State, and his future plan showed that he was a very qualified patriarch. The rotors hummed as they whistled through the air. In the slightly bumpy cabin, Wang Shengxiao quickly flipped through the documents, and his eyes suddenly froze. The Parliament decided to open number 004 Armament Depot to Xianyuan City. He raised his head and glanced at Firmament sitting opposite him. Wang Tianzong was seriously injured and missing. Di Jiang was expelled from Beihai. After Wang Tianzong became the patriarch, he had been following Wang Shengxiao like his bodyguard and half of his teacher. Firmament, who had never had a clear position in the Wang family of Beihai, had now become the deputy commander of the Beihai Corps. His status was above several deputy commanders and second only to Wang Shengxiao, who was also the commander of the Corps. He was in charge of the daily affairs of the Beihai Corps. The document Wang Shengxiao was asking about was also handed to him by him. The transmission channel of the document was also on the right track. The Army Ministry drafted the document, the President signed it, and the Cabinet remained silent. The document was again passed to the Army Ministry, and Dongxing Wudi signed it himself. Now, the only procedure before the document officially came into effect was the parliamentary seal. The document was drafted yesterday, and it was delivered to the various armies in the middle of the night. Such speed could be said to be truly swift and decisive. To be precise, Li Huaqing wants to open the No. 004 Armory to Xianyuan City. At present, this matter is controversial, so it hasn't been discussed in the parliament yet. However, there should be many different opinions within the parliament. Firmament said slowly. Wang Xingxiao lowered his head and looked at the document. He frowned. The so-called number 004 armament was not a large-scale arms aid, but a set of extremely advanced semi-automatic weapons system with an extremely advanced detection system, flexible scanning range, a variety of weapon terminals, strong controllability, great destructive power, and extremely high precision. It could perfectly adapt to the ground war and also take into account part of the anti-air capability. This system could be said to be one of the signboards of the military of Zhongzhou State in recent years. The lack of a clear code number did not mean that it was not valued, but it was more secretive. If such a system was fully equipped, putting aside the high cost of construction and maintenance, It was self-evident that it would contribute to the development and rise of Xianyuan City. With this system, Emperor Dong's palace in Xianyuan City were almost invincible. Li Huaqing proposed to open the number 004 armament to Xianyuan City, which was full of courage. If this deal could really succeed, then the relationship between Emperor Dong's palace and the academics would undoubtedly be greatly eased. On the other hand, this weapon system could also greatly influence Li Tianlan's choice and position. What's the possibility of the parliament passing it? Wang Shengxiao asked. It has Dongcheng Wudi's signature. Firmament's tone was very tactful, but Wang Shengxiao understood the meaning of this sentence. Dongcheng Wudi wanted to equip Xianyuan City with a 004 system, not to mention whether this would affect the cooperation between the Giant Group and the Southeast Group. When it came to the specific system, everyone wanted it. When Wang Tianzong was here, the Beihai Corps also applied for it twice, but they were both rejected. Now, the system was given to Xianyuan City, which showed the obvious intention of roping them in. If the parliament passed it, the Giant Group and the Southeast Group might still cooperate, but Dongcheng Wudi was bound to be more conservative in the following game. After all, he was soft-hearted. What about the Southeast Group? Opposed? Opposed when their ally made it clear that they wanted it? That was what the academics wanted to see most, wasn't it? What do you think? Wang Shengxiao suddenly said. It depends on how determined you are. Firmament smiled. Wang Shengxiao raised his eyebrows. It's not that the Corps can't provide a weapon system comparable to 004. Firmament whispered. In terms of weapon terminals, our combination is even more reasonable. Wang Shengxiao was silent for a moment. Of course, he knew which system of the Beihai Corps Firmament was talking about. But at present, 004 is indeed the most suitable system for Xianyuan City. Wang Shengxiao said. Different weapon systems had different focuses. For example, the desert prison of Zhongzhou State and the Sky Eye system equipped with several top field armies. In terms of power alone, because this system could be said to have the most powerful firepower of all weapon systems. But its precision could also be said to be the worst. The desert prison and the field armies didn't need high precision at all. What they needed was the explosive force on the battlefield that could cover everything in an instant. The Sky Eye, which could almost kill an invincible realm expert at the peak, was undoubtedly the best choice. The 004 system of Zhongzhou State had the most balanced performance. Its various performances might not be the best, but it had no shortcomings. The scope of investigation, the precision of weapons, the intensity of firepower, the scanning and identification. It had everything that should be and should not be. 004 was the most suitable system for guarding a city. The Wang family of Beihai certainly had its own weapon system. Their weapon system was even better than 004's in some aspects. It was more precise and faster. But correspondingly, the range of the Wang family of Beihai's weapon system was very small. In terms of adaptability in various situations, it was slightly worse than 004's. Wang Shengxiao thought silently, nodded, and then shook his head. But compared to Zhongzhou State, we're the most suitable ally for Xianyuan City. Li Tianlan can't be unaware of this. Firmament said quietly. That's true, but in the end, that's a matter for the future. I'm not saying that Li Tianlan doesn't have a long-term vision, but in many cases, even if he sees it, he may not be willing to think about it. We can't bet on whether he's willing to think about the future or not. The situation is here. If we want to persuade Li Tianlan to cooperate with us, we have to offer at least what Zhongzhou State can offer, or even more. Otherwise, this negotiation is over. Firmament nodded. Before he spoke, a loud voice sounded in the helicopter's cockpit in front of them. Report. Firmament raised his eyebrows, stood up, and said to Wang Shengxiao, I'll go and have a look. Wang Shengxiao nodded and continued to flip through the documents in his hand. Firmament left quickly and came back even faster. In less than 2 minutes, he came back to Wang Shengxiao and said with a strange look, We seem to be a little fast. What do you mean? Wang Shengxiao smiled. Ahead, Firmament coughed. According to the signal, we are less than 3 kilometers away from the President and the Prime Minister's special plane. Wang Shengxiao raised his head and looked at Firmament. Firmament was also looking at Wang Shengxiao. Are there any missiles on our helicopter? Wang Shengxiao suddenly asked. Firmament's body trembled violently. Wang Shengxiao burst out laughing. I'm just kidding. Why are you so nervous? He stood up, looked ahead, and said calmly, let's slow down. Anyway, we can't get ahead of them. Chapter 792. At 11:15 in the morning, the helicopter from Yuzhou slowly landed in front of the desert prison. The desert prison was headed by Xiao Mahai, the warden. All the prison guards in uniform stood in front of the prison gate to greet them. Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai stood at the forefront of the crowd. Xiao Mahai, who stood in front of all the prison guards, stood a step behind Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai. He lowered his head and looked like a slave. The sun shone on the yellow sand. In the light, Li Tianlan, who was originally a prisoner, held a stunning beauty in his arms. He looked more like the owner of the prison. In fact, it was true, and in the face of this scene, no one in the prison felt that there was anything wrong with it. Li Huacheng, who walked out of the cabin and saw this scene, still smiled and narrowed his eyes subconsciously. Chun Fangqing, who followed Li Huacheng, had a gloomy look in his eyes. It was not for any other reason, but in the heart of this giant who paid great attention to national interests and principles, Li Tianlan was a prisoner here. No matter what, he was a prisoner now. It was one thing for him to be the overlord of this place. Now he came here with Li Huacheng. Even if it was just a pretense, Li Tianlan should not be here. He should be locked up in prison. This was the rule, even if it was only on the surface. But it was obvious that neither Li Tianlan nor Xiao Mahai thought about this so-called rule at all. Li Huacheng turned his head and glanced at Chun Fangqing calmly. Then he strode toward Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan, who should have been flattered, took 2 steps forward and took the initiative to hold Li Huacheng's hand. But his expression was very calm, even reserved. Hello, Mr. President. Li Tianlan shook hands with the 2 giants one by one. Hello, Prime Minister. Tianlan, long time no see. How are you doing here? Li Huacheng said with a smile. The last time he met Li Tianlan was before Li Tianlan came to the desert prison. At that time, the two might not have completely fallen out with each other, but their thoughts were different, and their relationship had gradually drifted apart. Later, Li Huacheng's right-hand man, Deputy Minister Hua, who was also a giant, also came once. Since then, the relationship between the two parties had become even colder. But now that they were face to face, neither of them showed any other emotions on their faces. It's good here. Li Tianlan nodded. It's quiet and suitable for meditation. How is meditation something a young man should do? Your Highness is still young, so you should be full of vigor, singing proudly all the way. Chun Fangqing said with a smile. Let's go in and talk. It's rare that I have time today. I want to have a good chat with Tianlan. Li Huacheng smiled and waved his hand. There's no hurry. Li Tianlan laughed. You may not have received the news. Today, the desert prison is very expensive. The President and the Prime Minister have graced us with their presence, but behind us, the North Sea Patriarch's helicopter is about to arrive as well. Why don't you wait and chat with us? Li Huacheng's gaze instantly deepened. He looked at Li Tianlan and said nothing. 2 helicopters arrived at the desert at the same time. If Wang Shengxiao's helicopter could receive the signal from the front, how could their helicopter not receive the signal from the back? Even if they really couldn't receive it, when Wang Shengxiao and the others passed over the Beijing military region, someone had already reported to them. Li Huacheng was in a hurry, not because he wanted to deliberately neglect Wang Shengxiao, but because he wanted to take this opportunity to make Wang Shengxiao hesitate and misunderstand. He didn't mind Li Tianlan's delay. What he cared about was Li Tianlan's words, which seemed to be intentional yet unintentional. He was talking about the North Sea Patriarch, not the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. If Li Tianlan was an old fox who had been in the superstructure of Zhongzhou State all his life, this sentence could almost judge his position. But this sentence was said by such a young Li Tianlan. Li Huacheng really hoped that the other party's words were just unintentional. All right, Li Huaqing nodded with a smile. He glanced at Qin Weibai, who stood quietly beside Li Tianlan, and said with a smile, "Patriarch Qin, long time no see." Qin Weibai smiled without saying a word. She was elegant and demure, low-key without any sharpness. Qin Fanqing also nodded to Qin Weibai. When he visited Switzerland 2 months ago, he visited Qin Weibai alone, who had become the patriarch of the Lin clan. He also vaguely talked about the situation in Zhongzhou State, but neither the Lin clan nor Qin Weibai expressed their position, which was also the reason why he felt uncertain. The whistling sound swept from the high sky behind them. The helicopter in the distant sky was getting closer and closer. The strong airflow brought flying yellow sand. Li Tianlan raised his head and watched quietly. The helicopter without any weapons landed next to Li Huaqing's private plane. Wang Xingxiao, who looked calm, walked out of the cabin steadily. He nodded to Li Tianlan first, and then raised his hand to salute Li Huaqing and Qin Fanqing. Firmament followed Wang Xingxiao and also saluted. It was a tradition that the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai was also the commander of the Beihai Corps. Under normal circumstances, the commander of the Beihai Corps had no clear rank in the military of Zhongzhou State. But the deputy commander of the Beihai Corps was a veritable general of Zhongzhou State, and the treatment enjoyed by the commander often depended on the strength of the patriarch. For example, Wang Tianzong. In the meeting of the giants of the parliament, only Wang Tianzong was qualified to sit opposite Li Huaqing in the whole Zhongzhou State. Wang Xingxiao was obviously not qualified now. He took the initiative to salute. Combined with his current status, it was a low profile. Li Huaqing narrowed his eyes and chuckled. Why didn't Xingxiao inform us in advance that he would come to the desert? His words were light, but they were meaningful. Firmament took out a document and said calmly, "President, we have already reported to the army headquarters before we set off and got the permits signed by Minister Dongqing." The corner of Qin Fanqing's mouth twitched slightly, but he did not speak. "Your Highness, President, Prime Minister, shall we go in and talk?" Xiao Mahai, who had been ignored, put Li Tianlan directly in front and said cautiously, "The prison has prepared a banquet to welcome you." "Welcome you," Li Huaqing said to himself. He seemed to find it interesting and laughed. "Well, let's go in and talk." They walked into the prison canteen at the same time. There was a small private room in the canteen that was specially used to provide food for the warden. It was well decorated. At this time, the private room was full of wine and dishes. Wang Xingxiao and Firmament, who were walking at the back, glanced at the table and slightly raised the corners of their mouths at the same time. Li Huaqing and Qin Fanqing were calm, but a haze flashed in their eyes. Just because of the table of wine and dishes. Whether it was the wine or the dishes, this table was a real state banquet, and it was a very grand state banquet. It was exquisite, luxurious, and even extravagant. Qin Fanqing could not help pointing to the food on the table and looked at Xiao Mahai with a smile. "Warden, the food in the desert prison is good. The table in front of us, even if we don't count the wine, is worth 6 figures. Your food and beverage expenses are very high. Someone reported that someone in the prison misappropriated funds. Is it true?" Xiao Mahai smiled and said respectfully, "As long as it makes His Highness feel comfortable. I don't care about other things." Li Huaqing paused. Qin Fanqing's face was a little livid. As long as it made Li Tianlan feel comfortable, he didn't care about other things? He was the F*** king warden here, not anyone's slave. Wang Xingxiao's smile became more and more presumptuous. This table of wine and dishes seemed to prove Li Tianlan's attitude. He glanced at Qin Fanqing, a little playful. "What are you laughing at, Xingxiao? Do you think it's funny here or me?" Qin Fanqing was angry. Seeing Wang Xingxiao's eyes, he immediately retorted. Wang Xingxiao raised his eyebrows. "I can't smile." He took a step forward and instantly became expressionless, looking gloomy and majestic. "I can't smile. There's murderous intent," Li Tianlan suddenly said. Qin Fanqing narrowed his eyes and looked at the indifferent and gloomy Wang Xingxiao. He followed Li Tianlan's words and said, "You want to kill me? Wang Xingxiao looked straight into his eyes and said indifferently, "I didn't say it was right or not right." He took another step forward and asked word by word, "I said I want to kill you. Guess, how do I want to kill you?" Chapter 793. Chen Fanqing's face suddenly became extremely pale. It was not because of fear. The dense sword intent continued to spread out with Wang Shengxiao as the center, occupying every corner of the box. The sword energy was so dense, so small, but so sharp. The ferocious sharpness enveloped Chen Fanqing, stabbing him all over like fine needles. He felt a little pain, a little itchy, and a little numb. His body trembled uncontrollably under the shroud of sword qi, but his eyes remained calm and cold. After all, this was not a public place. In a public place, Wang Shengxiao, who represented the Wang family of Beihai and the Beihai Corps, saluted Chen Fanqing with a serious face. The various measures of Beihai would be reported to the cabinet in name, so no one could find any fault with it. But now, in such a private place, Wang Xingxiao no longer hid anything, and the ferocious killing intent completely pounced on Chen Fanqing's face. At this moment, no matter how powerful Chen Fanqing was, his life and death were also in the hands of Wang Xingxiao. If Li Tianlan didn't make a move. Li Huaqing subconsciously glanced at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan had already sat down with his arm around Qin Weibai's shoulder and conveniently passed a delicate side dish to Qin Weibai. The sharp sword energy was completely obliterated the moment it approached him. He did not look up, as if he was really eating peacefully. Li Huaqing's heart sank slightly. He took a deep breath and said, "Enough, what's wrong with you? It's just a joke," Wang Shengxiao said with a smile. He was not afraid of offending Chen Fanqing. The relationship between them had long been clear. No matter how humble he was, he could not dispel the plot of Chen Fanqing and Li Huaqing. On the surface, Wang Shengxiao did not mind abiding by the rules, but in private, Wang Shengxiao was also a proud person. How could he bear this kind of humiliation? He came here with the intention of destroying the place. He didn't dare to kill anyone, but he didn't mind making the other party suffer a little. The Prime Minister seems to be too nervous. The surrounding sword energy slowly disappeared. Wang Xingxiao patted Chen Fanqing on the shoulder and said in a very sincere tone, "It's really just a joke. How dare I kill people?" Chen Fanqing took a deep breath, and his pale face became livid. "You could try." He looked at Wang Xingxiao and said slowly, "Why don't you try? Let's turn a joke into a fact and see what happens." Now is not the time. Wang Shengxiao smiled and adjusted Chen Fanqing's neckline. "Kill the Prime Minister of Zhongzhou State? TSK, TSK, TSK. This is too much. But I remember that the Wang family of Beihai has done something even worse. As for the consequences," he chuckled and narrowed his eyes. "That seems to be the beginning of the Wang family of Beihai standing at the peak. Am I right? Something worse than killing Chen Fanqing." Li Huaqing and Chen Fanqing's pupils dilated. He shrank back and stared at Wang Shengxiao in silence for a long time. Wang Shengxiao's expression was easygoing and calm, but everyone could feel a hint of madness in his expression. Is this a threat or a warning? An elegant voice suddenly rang out. It was as light as the clouds and the wind. Qin Weibai looked at Wang Shengxiao, and her eyes were so bright that he couldn't look at them directly. "This is a joke." Wang Shengxiao spread his hands and laughed. "Eat." He asked Firmament to take a seat and took the initiative to pour himself a glass of wine, drinking it in one gulp. "Tisk." Wang Xingxiao put down the glass and said with a smile, "Good wine." He gave Xiao Mahai a thumbs up and said with a smile, "General Xiao is even more courageous. As long as your highness and madam are satisfied." Xiao Mahai, who was standing behind Li Tianlan, said in a flat tone. The moment he heard Chen Fanqing's words, he realized that the wine and dishes on the table in front of him seemed to have caused a misunderstanding between the two giants, and even made them think that it was Li Tianlan's attitude. Xiao Mahai really didn't think so much. He had put everything on Li Tianlan. It didn't matter whether it was the president or the prime minister. As long as Li Tianlan was satisfied, all the problems such as funding were small problems. That was what he really thought. Now hearing Wang Shengxiao's praise, his indifferent words could be regarded as an explanation. Let's eat. Li Huaqing sat down casually and picked up the chopsticks. Chen Fanqing also sat down and didn't speak for a while. Even if he had 1,000 words in his heart, he had to admit that at this time his momentum was really suppressed by Wang Shengxiao, and he seemed to be a little less confident. "What are you doing here?" Li Tianlan asked casually, glancing at Wang Shengxiao while putting food into Qin Weibai's bowl. "I want to talk to you." Wang Shengxiao looked at Li Tianlan and said seriously, "No, you're here to threaten me." Li Tianlan said. What he said just now was not only a threat to Li Huaqing, but also to Chen Fanqing and Li Tianlan. Everyone present knew why the president and the prime minister appeared in the desert prison at this time, and they also knew why Wang Shengxiao appeared here. The situation was obvious. If Li Tianlan agreed to the request of the two giants, the Wang family of Beihai would no longer have the possibility of turning the tables. They might still be the top wealthy family and superpower in the dark world in the future, but losing their biggest trump card was obviously not something Wang Shengxiao could accept. Wang Shengxiao, who had no hope of turning the tables, was bound to use all means to reverse this possibility. Anyone could be on Wang Shengxiao's list and suffer the most hysterical targeting of the Wang family of Beihai. This time was different from the last time. Last time, Wang Shengxiao showed his strength to the world. Now, Wang Shengxiao directly put his madness in front of the most important parties. "I didn't mean that," Wang Shengxiao said slowly. "No matter what, this is not my intention. I want to have a serious talk with you." "Okay," Li Tianlan nodded. "After the meal. Let's wait until the prime minister and the president leave." Wang Shengxiao smiled and deliberately put the prime minister in front. "Okay." Li Tianlan still said the same thing. Li Huaqing's face changed for a moment and then returned to normal. The meal was unusually dull, but with Qin Weibai beside him, Li Tianlan still ate with relish. After lunch, Wang Shengxiao took the initiative to leave. Xiao Mahai arranged a meeting room for the prison. Li Tianlan went in with the two giants. Xiao Mahai stood outside the meeting room as a security guard. Li Tianlan sat quietly in the chair and said nothing. "Tianlan, do you have any thoughts?" Li Huaqing took the initiative to ask. "What?" Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. Wang Shengxiao's attitude during the meal. Li Huaqing went straight to the point. Arrogant and domineering. "Don't go too far," Chen Fanqing said coldly. This was his attitude, not only to Beihai, but also to Wang Shengxiao. "We've already put a knife to his neck. Do you expect him to be respectful?" Li Tianlan said disapprovingly. "First of all, no one put a knife on his neck. We just hope that Beihai province can respect the order and rules of Zhongzhou State more." Li Huaqing looked at Li Tianlan and said seriously, "No one in Zhongzhou State wants Beihai to have different rules of the game from Zhongzhou State. They are qualified to stand at the top, but standing at the top doesn't mean that they can take things that don't belong to them. We just take away this part. The Wang family of Beihai will still be good in the future. Everyone, including me and the Prime Minister, including the Wang family of Beihai, all of us should take what belongs to us and let go of what doesn't belong to us." "Like me?" Li Tianlan smiled playfully. "Like what about me? What doesn't belong to me?" Li Huaqing was stunned and quickly exchanged a look with Chen Fanqing. "Tiannan," Chen Fanqing said, "Tianlan, Tiannan shouldn't belong to you, but to Zhongzhou State." "Ha!" Li Tianlan's voice was a little cold. "Then what should belong to me?" "Kunlun City." Li Huaqing's deep voice sounded. "It should belong to you. If you want, Kunlun City can belong to you from now on." Chapter 794. Wonderful free reading. If you want, Kunlun City can belong to you from now on. Li Huaqing's voice was calm, not impassioned, as if he was talking about a normal trifle. However, if these words were heard in the outside world, it would undoubtedly set off an extremely violent storm. Kunlun City represented the Special Warfare Group. All of these could belong to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan didn't like the name Kunlun City, but it didn't matter. More than 20 years ago, Kunlun City was called Zhuanyuan Tai. Now, as long as Li Tianlan nodded, he could change Kunlun City to Tianlan City, or even continue to call it Zhuanyuan Tai. No doubt, this was the offer of the Zhongzhou State Parliament. Exchange Kunlun City for Tiannan. Did you give up on Guxingyan? Li Tianlan was silent for a long time before he asked. Even he didn't expect Li Huaqing and Chun Fangqing to be so bold to exchange Kunlun City for Tiannan, which showed their determination and the serious consequences of refusing this negotiation. No one denies Gu Xingyan's contribution to Zhongzhou State over the years. He has made contributions, but, to be honest, he hasn't done a good job over the years. We believe in his potential and are willing to hand over the safety of Zhongzhou State to him. Chun Fangqing looked at Li Tianlan and said sincerely, Your Highness, you must believe that even in the past 20 years, no one has looked down on the Li family. What we are willing to hand over is what we think we deserve. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. He knew that Chun Fangqing was telling the truth. No one could look down on the Li family. In fact, since Chun Fangqing entered the parliament, whether he was a member or elected to the Li family, he would take time to visit Li Honghe every year. Not only Chun Fangqing, but also Hua Zhenyang of the academics, Zhou Yinhai of the North Group, Thunder God of the Giant Group, and Yi Dongsheng of the Southeast Group. Every year, the six would send representatives to go through the motions to show their respect for Li Huaqing, the veteran. But that was all. However, Chun Fangqing's words obviously didn't mean that. Li Tianlan had heard from Li Honghe a long time ago. When talking to people, don't listen to what they say, but listen to what they don't say. What we are willing to hand over. What we think we deserve. Li Tianlan thought about it. The underlying meaning of this sentence is that we shouldn't get what we don't want to give. Li Tianlan laughed. He looked at Chun Fangqing and said seriously, You mean I can get Kunlun City, but I don't deserve Tiannan, right? The headquarters of Emperor Dong's palace can be built in Tiannan. Li Huaqing continued. The negotiation this time was very direct, almost without any foreshadowing. But every inch of the territory of Zhongzhou State should be affected by the will of Zhongzhou State. We allow the emergence of new groups, but we don't allow the emergence of transcendental forces that can transcend above Zhongzhou State. At this point, Tianlan, you should understand that Zhongyuan province for the Dongchang clan and Beihai province for the Wang family of Beihai are two completely different concepts. Li Tianlan nodded. It was well known that Zhongyuan province was the backyard of the Dongchang clan. But the daily operation of Zhongyuan province was still under the control of the parliament and the rules of the game of Zhongzhou State. A series of personnel appointments in Zhongyuan were operated by the Dongchang clan within the giant group. It could be regarded as the will of the group, or the collective will, but the collective of Zhongzhou State. Beihai province was completely different. All their appointments were directly issued by Mount Dibbing, which was undoubtedly a dictatorship in the eyes of the parliament. Moreover, they were outside the system of Zhongzhou State, but they controlled the Southeast Group remotely. Their power had developed to such an extent that it could be said to be the real peak. Even if the Wang family of Beihai was not disloyal for those in power, they would be uneasy and find ways to weaken it. The rise of Li Tianlan made the parliament see even worse signs. They fully affirmed Li Tianlan's potential. Before he entered the invincible realm, they wanted him to replace Kunlun City, which was enough to prove this point. Now, almost no one would doubt Li Tianlan's future achievements. At the age of 20, if he became the god of war of Zhongzhou State, it was enough to protect Zhongzhou State for decades, and even make Zhongzhou State a dominant power in the dark world. No one was willing to kill Li Tianlan, but the premise was that he knew his position. With the rapid development of Xianyuan City on the right track, Tiannan had made more and more people feel uneasy. All kinds of signs showed that, as time went by, Tiannan would become the second Beihai province sooner or later. This was the situation that Zhongzhou State absolutely did not want to see. So Li Huaqing and Chun Fangqing came here at the same time. They wanted to pull Li Tianlan to the right position, such as the position of the god of war of Zhongzhou State. then slowly control Tiannan in the name of the parliament. At the same time, Li Tianlan would play a key role in the game between the parliament and Beihai. This was the most satisfactory result for them. But this was not the result that Li Tianlan wanted. To be honest, there was no problem of whether it was a loss or not to exchange Kunlun City for Tiannan. The god of war of Zhongzhou State had a high position and power. He kept the peace of a country by himself, and his status was transcendent. Li Huaqing and Qin Fanqing were indeed very sincere. But Li Tianlan preferred a place where his family could slowly accumulate wealth and relax in peace. Li Tianlan did not think that Li Huaqing and the others were wrong, nor did he think that he was wrong. For so many years, there have been many unexpected situations in Beihai. Although these accidents are not all bad, we think it's time to make some changes. Any change will have a price, and it will also cause chaos. Tianlan, we hope to leave the desert prison immediately and temporarily take charge of Beihai to help stabilize the order in Beihai. What do you think? Li Huaqing looked at Li Tianlan seriously and asked. Li Tianlan's heart was in awe, and his face was expressionless. A heavy pressure came from all directions. From beginning to end, neither Qin Fanqing nor Li Huaqing mentioned Tiannan much. They mostly talked about Beihai. But the present of Beihai was the future of Tiannan. Li Tianlan's answer also represented a lot of things. Li Tianlan was silent. Li Huaqing and Qin Fanqing's eyes were fixed on Li Tianlan, and their eyes were burning. We still have to believe in Beihai. After a long time, Li Tianlan slowly said, I believe that Beihai has a way to deal with some chaotic situations. Beihai province does not need me to take unnecessary steps to stabilize the order. After all, things have not developed to the worst extent. He spoke very slowly, almost word by word. He said it very cautiously, but the key words still sounded extremely harsh to the ears of the two giants. Unnecessary steps. Li Huaqing's eyes suddenly narrowed. Chapter 795. Next to the conference room was a small lounge. It used to be the office of a deputy warden, but with the transfer of the powerful deputy warden, although the position was still maintained in the desert prison, the deputy warden no longer had an office. Instead, it was transformed into a lounge. That was the real, superfluous move. Although the desert prison was important, it was a small place, and there would be no meetings all year round. When the news of Li Huaqing and Qin Fanqing's inspection of the desert prison came, Xiao Mahai sent someone to clean the conference room and swept a thick layer of dust. The conference room was not high class, and the lounge next to it was even more so. Fortunately, it was clean and tidy after cleaning. Wang Xingxiao sat on the shabby sofa in the lounge and looked up at the oil paintings on the wall, which could be bought with 100 yuan. His expression was unusually calm. The conference room was soundproof. The sound inside was isolated, and it was quiet. Wang Xingxiao did not know the result of the negotiation. He picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea. Out of the corner of his eye, a dreamlike figure just passed by the lounge. Wang Xingxiao straightened up subconsciously. Qin Weibai, who passed by the lounge, turned to look at him and nodded slightly. Without any hesitation, Wang Xingxiao made an inviting gesture through the transparent window. His eyes were still calm. It was a kind of calm that was almost empty. There was no confidence or anxiety. He was so calm that it was chilling. Qin Weibai's bright eyes blinked. She hesitated, then pushed the door and walked into the lounge. Hello, Patriarch Qin. Wang Shengxiao's voice was soft and quiet. After the destruction of the Samsara Palace, Qin Weibai jumped from a number 2 figure of the Samsara Palace to the patriarch of the Lin clan, a hidden giant. The news had not spread wildly in the dark world, but it was not a secret. It was similar to the Lin clan. Even if they were hidden, how could the world not know of their existence? Not to mention other things, some of the branches of the Lin clan that spread all over the world were a force to be feared. The Lin clan had many branches. Their forces were loose, but they were extremely large. They had not had internal strife for hundreds of years. If the forces of all the branches were added together, it was a force far beyond the Wang family of Beihai. However, It was impossible for the Lin clan to make use of all the branches. Under any circumstances, the Lin clan could be said to be a retreat for the Wang family of Beihai. However, the battle in Eastern Europe made Lin Fengding put down a lot of stubbornness. From a moment Qin Weibai became the patriarch of the Lin clan, the years of friendship between the Wang family of Beihai and the Lin clan seemed to have disappeared. "What's the matter?" Qin Weibai sat down opposite Wang Shengxiao. Her slender legs were crossed. She looked dignified and elegant, with a strong sense of alienation. "I have two things to ask." Wang Shengxiao nodded. He seemed to want to light a cigarette, but after taking it out, he put it back on the table. "Speak." Qin Weibai nodded. There was no extra expression on her face. "What do you think of the president and the prime minister coming to the desert this time?" Wang Shengxiao asked. As expected, this is an inevitable choice. Tianlan is the best candidate, not only because of the Wang family of Beihai. Qin Weibai said lightly. Wang Shengxiao nodded in agreement. Letting Li Tianlan go to Beihai to clean up the mess could be regarded as using Li Tianlan's force. But Li Tianlan's value, even in the eyes of Zhongzhou state, was immeasurable. He was definitely more than a force or a chess piece that could be used. The Zhongzhou state parliament had high hopes for Li Tianlan's future. This so-called use was just the beginning of letting Li Tianlan represent the future of the underground world of Zhongzhou state. It could be foreseen that Zhongzhou state would give a very generous return this time. What can they give him? Wang Shengxiao whispered. Half of Beihai? Or Kunlun City? He smiled. This should be the best thing they can offer, and the most likely thing to catch Li Tianlan's eye. You have to be clear. Zhongzhou state can give him half of Beihai and Kunlun City, but the Wang family of Beihai can't. Qin Weibai's voice was cold and calm. So you don't expect me to come here? Do you think the president and the prime minister can persuade him to give up Tiannan, which he depends on in the future? Wang Shengxiao looked straight into Qin Weibai's eyes. This is not giving up. Tiannan is also the territory of Zhongzhou state. If we take a step back, Tianlan will get the whole of Zhongzhou state. Qin Weibai remained calm. The whole of Zhongzhou state? It's just the dark world of Zhongzhou state, which is restrained everywhere. What about Tiannan? He has Tiannan, so he has infinite possibilities. Wang Shengxiao stood up and sneered. I can't give him Kunlun City, nor half of the Wang family of Beihai, but Mount Dibing will try its best to help him turn Tiannan into the second Beihai province, a land that belongs to Zhongzhou state, but also a kingdom that belongs to the future East Emperor alone. He looked at Qin Weibai and asked, Isn't that good? The prospects are good. Qin Weibai nodded. But how long can a person's kingdom last? If there is Beihai, Tiannan will not disappear. If there is Tiannan, Beihai will not disappear. We're the best allies. Wang Shengxiao said in a sincere tone. Qin Weibai's mouth twitched. She looked a little disapproving. Please help me, Patriarch Qin. Wang Shengxiao took a deep breath and said in a more sincere tone, I believe that with your wisdom, it is not difficult to see what the existence of Beihai means to Tiannan. The strength of Beihai province is not impossible to survive, but it needs a balance. More than 20 years ago, it was the Li family who maintained this balance. At that time, although Beihai was strong from the standpoint of Zhongzhou state, the Li family could balance Beihai. More than 20 years later, Zhongzhou state has Emperor Dong's palace. The Li family was wiped out by you. Qin Weibai's voice was cold. Wang Shengxiao was silent for a while and said slowly, I'm willing to pay the price as long as he is willing to talk. Qin Weibai stood up and shook her head. I will tell Tianlan your attitude, but how to choose this matter is up to him. I won't interfere. She took a step forward and was about to leave the lounge. Is she all right? Wang Shengxiao suddenly asked. Qin Weibai paused and raised her eyebrows. Who? The one in Switzerland. The sword intent enveloped the lounge. Wang Shengxiao's subtle voice came along the sword intent. Li Tianlan, you don't know the one in Switzerland, right? Qin Weibai's figure suddenly became stiff. She turned around little by little and looked at Wang Shengxiao. Wang Shengxiao looked calm. So calm that it was a little hollow. What do you mean? Qin Weibai asked word by word. Give me a hand. Wang Shengxiao said slowly. I just want you to help me. So, Qin Weibai sneered. Is this a threat? Don't forget, if Tianlan knows about this, I don't have to say anything. No one in the Wang family of Beihai will survive. I know. Wang Shengxiao nodded. So this is not a threat. This is just a request. He slowly sat on the sofa and finally lit a cigarette. He took a deep breath. I have no choice. Now it seems that this matter is not the most fatal for Beihai. Li Tianlan and the parliament have joined hands. Whether I tell them or not, Beihai will not have a chance to win. His voice was calm and a little crazy. So, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I tell them or not. I can keep the secret and try to wake her up, but only if you can show me hope. He held the cigarette hard and said in a low voice, Have you been to the stage of formidable person? He took a deep breath. The weight of the whole Beihai is there. Qin Weibai looked at him silently for a long time. I don't accept threats. After a long time, she said slowly, I'm sorry. Wang Shengxiao looked at her and said, Answer me a question. Qin Weibai suddenly spoke. Wang Shengxiao was stunned and narrowed his eyes. Go ahead. What's the matter with Wang Xiaoyao? Why did he do this with you? Qin Weibai asked. Her eyes were cold and rational. Wang Shengxiao's pupils suddenly contracted, and he did not speak. Did he embarrass you? Qin Weibai smiled faintly. No. Wang Shengxiao was silent for a long time before he exhaled. I don't know. A bright light flashed in Qin Weibai's eyes. She looked at Wang Shengxiao and nodded. I see. Chapter 796. Wang Shengxiao said that he didn't know what was going on with Wang Xiaoyao. He didn't know why he officially broke with Mount Dibbing. He didn't know why he betrayed Wang Tianzong. He didn't know. Most of the time, not knowing was an answer in itself. The three simple words could be described as really broad and profound. He really didn't know. He didn't know how to say it. He didn't know if he should say it. He didn't know if he could say it, or what was the use of saying it. There were countless possibilities, but they could all be described as not knowing. Wang Shengxiao sat on the sofa, his expression as calm as a rock. If this was an exchange or a deal, then he had already shown the greatest sincerity. He gave Qin Weibai the answer. In that case, would Qin Weibai help him? Then, he heard Qin Weibai's answer. I got it. Her voice was elegant and carried a kind of pure literal meaning. I got it. Wang Shengxiao looked up at her and thought, What do you know? But he didn't ask. He just said, I hope Patriarch Qin can help me. I will try to persuade Tianlan if he doesn't agree to Zhongzhou State now. Qin Weibai said, But I won't guarantee anything. Wang Shengxiao said, and took a deep look at her. Thank you. He put out the cigarette, but in the ashtray, and narrowed his eyes. When he was about to say something, he suddenly noticed a faint gaze falling behind him. Wang Shengxiao turned around subconsciously. In his sight, separated by a seemingly ordinary glass, Qin Weibai was standing outside and looking at him with a calm expression. Wang Shengxiao was suddenly shocked and turned around subconsciously. Qin Weibai, who had been standing in front of him, had disappeared. The corner of Wang Shengxiao's mouth twitched, and then he found that there was no natural and rich fragrance in the lounge. Keep your so-called secret, because in many cases, even if you can say it, the person you face may not be true. Qin Weibai said, nodded, and turned to leave. Wang Shengxiao's face turned livid. He slowly sat on the sofa and finally smiled bitterly. The prison was extremely cold. The president and the prime minister came for an inspection. Everyone in the prison kept to their posts, and the prisoners were also strictly watched. The corridors of the prison seemed extremely empty. Qin Weibai walked all the way, and the sound of her high-heeled shoes on the ground echoed clearly. Xiao Qing, who felt a little lost, reorganized Li Tian. As soon as she stepped out of Lan's room, she saw Qin Weibai walking over. She froze, bit her lip, and hesitated for a moment before saying softly, Madam, I'll clean up this place from now on. Qin Weibai nodded and said casually. Xiao Qing wanted to say no, but facing this woman, she didn't have the courage to speak. She nodded silently and whispered, What does Madam need? I'll take a break. Qin Weibai waved her hand. She seemed to have thought of something that she would have to endure at night. Her bright eyes became moister, with helplessness and expectation. She walked into the dormitory, took off her shoes, got into the quilt, and stared at the ceiling, thinking about how to persuade Li Tianlan. Today's negotiation was doomed to have no result. Li Tianlan really didn't intend to cooperate with Zhongzhou State, but he also didn't decide to join forces with the Wang family of Beihai. Qin Weibai could see his hesitation, so Qin Weibai was not sure what the result of today's negotiation would be. But if she wanted to persuade Li Tianlan, it was necessary to talk pillow talk. There was a question that was actually very important. That was the question she asked Wang Shengxiao. And Wang Shengxiao also gave her the answer. This could make her see a lot of things clearly and even confirm some things. In this way, she naturally knew what was the best choice for Li Tianlan. Qin Weibai closed her eyes. In the darkness, there seemed to be a blue notebook in the depths of her memory. It was not Dong Xinghuangtu's notes. It was her notes that were still sleeping in Switzerland. Those memories, which she didn't know belonged to the past or the future, and whether they were illusory or real, became words engraved in the notebook in the depths of her memory. It might be a lot of stories because it involved a lot of people, but what each person recorded on the paper was only a few short sentences. It was like history, or even simpler than history. It was about Wang Xiaoyao. There was only one sentence in the blue notebook, 12 short words. If you deserve to die, you will die. If you seek benevolence and get benevolence, you will not be free. Qin Weibai was deep in thought. Dongqing Wudi was waiting for a call. Maybe not just him. At this moment, many powerful figures in Zhongzhou State were waiting for a phone call or a notice. Bai Qingxian sat opposite Dongqing Wudi and was silent. Since Wang Shengxiao showed the strongest side of Beihai, the situation in the northeast of Zhongzhou State had been very subtle. As a member of the parliament of Zhongzhou State, as the executive minister of the army headquarters and the commander of the Border Praetorian Corps of Zhongzhou State, Dongqing Wudi came to the northeast to inspect the Black Dragon Army more frequently, which also made it convenient for him to meet Bai Qingxian. Now, Dongqing Wudi inspected the Black Dragon Army again, but it was obvious that his current focus was not here at all. What will be the result? Bai Qingxian lowered her voice and asked softly. It's hard to say. Dongqing Wudi shook his head solemnly. But according to the time, it should be almost time for the result. What do you want the result to be? Bai Qingxian asked softly. In recent years, the couple's relationship, which had been frozen for many years, had rapidly warmed up, almost returning to the period when they just got married. When they were alone, the atmosphere was extremely harmonious. I don't know. Dongqing Wudi thought for a moment. It is said that Wang Qinglei privately criticized some of Kunlun City's ways of doing things. If this news is true, Kunlun City should be the biggest bargaining chip of Zhongzhou State. Exchange Tunnan with Kunlun City. He was silent and did not speak for a while. Exchange Tianan with Kunlun City. No one could say that such an exchange was a loss. In other words, as long as Li Tianlan was willing to get Kunlun City, he would lead the Li family back to the peak more than 20 years ago. The god of war of Zhongzhou State. This position was the glory of the Li family for hundreds of years. If Li Tianlan was unwilling to give up Tianan, it was obvious that he wanted to lead the Li family to a new path. Similar to the Wang family of Beihai. Maybe not exactly the same, but for Zhongzhou State, the two were essentially the same. Such a choice, for Dongqing Wudi, was also a little complicated. No matter how close his relationship with Li Tianlan was, he was still a soldier after all. He might not be disappointed with Li Tianlan, but he always felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. In fact, the president originally invited me and Chen Fanqing to go to the desert this time. Dongqing Wudi said softly. The first, second, and third giants of Zhongzhou State went to the desert at the same time. It was a little too much. And then? Bai Qingxian was stunned and asked. And then I'm here. Dongqing Wudi smiled. If I go, Tianlan will be a little embarrassed. If I don't go, I will face the president and the prime minister alone. Everything he does is his own choice. He paused and whispered, no matter what he chooses, I will support him. Chapter 797. When the roar of the helicopter's rotor sounded, Qin Weibai frowned slightly and opened her eyes. The light in the luxurious room had become dark. The hazy moonlight shone through the window like a layer of gauze. Qin Weibai sat up from the bed, shook her head gently, and got up to the window. This was the highest place in the desert prison, with a wide view. Looking out from here, the traces of the helicopter leaving were still clear. The yellow sand rolled up slowly fell from the sky with a large amount of smoke and dust. The helicopter had flown far away, and only the signal lights kept flashing, looking a little determined. Another helicopter was still parked in front of the desert prison, and it seemed very lonely. Qin Weibai's eyes gradually became clear. She turned around, found a bathrobe, and walked into the bathroom to take a shower. When she came out again, she had become the calm patriarch of the Lin clan. She dried her hair and walked out of the dormitory. Outside the dormitory, a plump and enchanting young woman was walking over. When she saw Qin Weibai, she subconsciously paused and then gently bowed and said, "Madam." Qin Weibai nodded. "Has the head of state left?" "He just left." The young woman whispered. "How was the talk?" Qin Weibai walked to the conference room and asked casually. She didn't expect to get any answer, but she didn't expect to hear the content. "I don't know the details, but His Highness and the Prime Minister seemed to have quarreled, and their words were very fierce," the young woman said with trepidation. She could appear here not because she had any special ability, but because she was Xiao Mahai's sister, because her appearance and figure were good enough, and because her charm and temperament were tempting enough. In the end, she was just an ordinary woman. She knew that Li Tianlan was a big shot, but for her, there was no big shot more impactful than the president and the prime minister. An hour ago, when she went to the conference room to deliver fruit, she clearly heard the quarrel in the conference room. On the news broadcast, the voice of the prime minister, who had always been gentle, was loud and angry. Li Tianlan was tit for tat and did not give it at all. The young woman finally understood how strong the young man whose brother had been flattering was. But when she thought of his opponent, the young woman inevitably felt a little uneasy. Qin Weibai paused and then continued to move forward. The two figures passed by the lounge. Wang, patriarch of the Wang family of Beihaixing Shao, was still sitting there, neither fast nor slow, neither arrogant nor impatient. It seemed that he could sit there until the end of time. Qin Weibai did not stop and walked toward the conference room. Xiao Mahai, who had been guarding here, silently stepped back when he saw Qin Weibai. He lowered his head respectfully. Qin Weibai appreciated it a little. She wasn't admiring Xiao Mahai's attitude towards her. She admired Xiao Mahai's attitude towards Li Huaqing and Chun Fangqing. The ridiculously sumptuous banquet at noon had proven this point. But now Li Huaqing and Chun Fangqing left the desert prison, but Xiao Mahai still stood there, not even sending them off. This was undoubtedly a kind of attitude. This was not the so-called proof of allegiance. It was a true attitude, loyal and devoted. In terms of strength and ability, Xiao Mahai wasn't bad. Plus, he was the center of attention. This person could be used. You've worked hard. Have you eaten? Qin Weibai stopped and greeted Xiao Mahai. Xiao Mahai was obviously stunned for a moment and seemed a little flattered. He scratched his head and smiled honestly. "What would you like to eat, madam?" "Something light. Don't be too extravagant. You go and prepare. We'll have a meal together later and have a drink with His Highness." Qin Weibai's smile was faint and just right. "Okay, got it." Xiao Mahai nodded and rushed straight to the kitchen. Qin Weibai looked at his back and smiled. Then she pushed the door open and walked into the conference room. The conference room was filled with smoke. Li Tianlan sat alone in the chair, relaxed, holding a cigarette and expressionless. He didn't even notice Qin Weibai coming in. "What are you thinking about? Why are you so absorbed?" Qin Weibai walked over and stood behind him. She reached out and rubbed his shoulders. Li Tianlan put out the cigarette but leaned back and took a long breath. He shook his head and said, "I'm not thinking about anything. I just think it's good to be alone for a while." "Do you think I'm bothering you?" Qin Weibai tilted her head and gently raised the corner of her mouth. Li Tianlan smiled and patted the soft little hand on his shoulder. "How was the talk?" Qin Weibai asked. It's neither good nor bad. They want me to have a clear attitude. Li Tianlan shook his head and said, but I didn't make a clear statement. This result was not good for either Li Tianlan or the parliament. At best, it was not the worst. Before the new result appeared, both sides could reluctantly accept it, but that was all. Therefore, in the end, this negotiation was more or less on bad terms, but not to the extent of falling out. Zhongzhou State might reduce its assistance to Tianan because of Li Tianlan's current attitude, but for Xinyuan City, which was already on the right track, it would not have much impact. And Li Tianlan also needed some time to think about it before he could make up his mind. Haven't you decided yet? Qin Weibai asked softly. It's easier said than done. Li Tianlan shook his head. Zhongzhou State had shown enough sincerity. Li Huaqing and Chun Fangqing had analyzed all kinds of possibilities for him. As long as he was willing, Emperor Dong's palace could completely replace Kunlun City in 2 or 3 years. This talk was very in-depth. Kunlun City, Tianan. If the two sides were put on a scale, the weight was almost the same, but the position was different. It was impossible to say who was higher or lower. Li Tianlan really didn't know how to choose for a moment. Accepting the olive branch of Zhongzhou State and facing the possible suppression of the parliament in a few years, or joining hands with Beihai to play against the parliament, the risk was the same. The key was what Li Tianlan did. Such a choice would affect Li Tianlan, Emperor Dong's palace, Xinyuan City, and even the fate of the Li family for many years to come. Li Tianlan was not indecisive, but this matter really needed to be cautious. The promise I made was that I would not join hands with the Wang family of Beihai for the time being. Li Tianlan said softly. He would not join hands with the Wang family of Beihai for the time being. The focus of this sentence was not the second half. It was temporary. No one knew how long this temporary would last. Qin Weibai understood and said softly, You want to see the trump card of the Wang family of Beihai? Li Tianlan's temporary could be a long time or a short time. Now that all the superpowers seemed to be targeting the Wang family of Beihai, the parliament of Zhongzhou State understood that Li Tianlan would stand by for the time being and would definitely speed up the action against the Wang family of Beihai. Li Tianlan wanted to see what the Wang family of Beihai would do to deal with this situation, see what trump card they had, and then decide whether to cooperate with them. This was completely understandable. More than that, Li Tianlan smiled and said, It depends on the offer of the Wang family of Beihai. Chapter 798. The cabin that was completely shrouded in darkness emitted a faint light. The faint light illuminated Chun Fangqing's face into an extremely gloomy green color, looking gloomy and terrifying. The atmosphere was oppressive and heavy. Li Huaqing sat opposite Chun Fangqing, looking in the direction of the desert prison, narrowing his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. Who? With a long sigh, Chun Fangqing's body relaxed slightly, and his complexion gradually returned to normal. Li Huaqing smiled and said in a calm voice, Don't mind him. Li Tianlan is not an ordinary young man. Neither is Wang Shengxiao. Chun Fangqing clenched his teeth and let out a muffled snort, not saying anything. Today's trip to the desert could be said to be the biggest stain in his political career. He had been directly contradicted by 2 young people, one discussing his life and death, and the other directly questioning his standpoint. Chun Fangqing had wanted to fall out with them more than once, but in the end, he had endured it. Because he couldn't move Li Tianlan, Wang Shengxiao couldn't move either. At the very least, today, in the desert, in a relatively private setting, when facing those 2 youngsters, if they decided not to give him face, he could only suffer. The other party was not an ordinary young man. Of the 2 of them, one was meditating in prison. One carried the Wang family on his back and moved forward with difficulty. This pair of young people was no longer the arrogant and domineering playboys who relied on their elders. Their power and ability had already enabled them to stand at the peak of Zhongzhou State. Even in the face of him, the prime minister, they could maintain a fairly detached and calm attitude. Chun Fangqing closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and said with a self-deprecating smile, I'm old. It's fine if some grievances are beneficial to the bigger picture. Li Huaqing thought for a while and said softly. Chen Fanqing nodded and did not speak. He could understand the meaning of these words, and even he himself was such a person. He was indeed a prime minister who put the interests of Zhongzhou state above everything else. As the number 2 figure in Zhongzhou state and the leader of the prince group, not everyone had the courage to decisively kill a member of his group. Chen Fanqing had done this before. He might have his own selfish motives, but he had never been ambiguous about the major issues of right and wrong for so many years. However, as time passed, especially during this period of time, his mentality gradually became unbalanced. That is coming after a long time in power the reluctance, anxiety, and apprehension of losing power. The game between Zhongzhou state and Beihai had reached a critical moment. The negotiation between the parliament and Li Tianlan had also reached a critical moment. All kinds of things, constantly changing situations, surging undercurrents, rising winds, and scudding clouds. But in the end, it was still because of this time next year. It was the general election of Zhongzhou state. This is the real focus. Everything could come to an end with this change. At the very least, there would be peace for a long time. From this year to next, it would be the last year of Chen Fanqing's term. Chen Fanqing really wanted to do something, because compared to Li Huaqing, who was likely to be re-elected next year, he really didn't have much time, especially Li Tianlan. It could even be said that he was extremely eager to make Li Tianlan agree to their conditions. Chen Fanqing dreamed of tying such a heavenly son who could serve Zhongzhou state for decades to Zhongzhou state. It was no exaggeration to say that if Li Tianlan could agree to their conditions today, then Chen Fanqing would be the real main force when Kunlun City was taken over by Emperor Dong's palace. Attacking Beihai and trapping Li Tianlan were Chen Fanqing's biggest demands in the coming year. If he did this well, it would be enough to lay the foundation for the pattern of Zhongzhou state in the next few decades. After next year, Chen Fanqing shook his head and hesitated to speak. Li Huaqing sighed slightly, and there was bitterness in his eyes. Next year would be Chen Fanqing's 10th year in office. For Dong Xingwudi, this was his 5th year in office. With Dong Xingwudi's prestige and achievements in the military of Zhongzhou state, no one could stop his re-election unless there was a great accident. He was a member of the parliament of Zhongzhou state, a director, and the standing minister of the army headquarters. Now, after the president and the prime minister, Dong Xingwudi ranked 3rd. After next year, when Chen Fanqing retired, the new prime minister could not be ahead of Dong Xingwudi. At that time, Dong Xingwudi would become the number 2 figure in Zhongzhou state, ranking 2nd only to Li Huaqing. Because of the particularity of the military, the retirement age of the main leaders of the army headquarters could be appropriately relaxed. Li Huaqing would inevitably retire in the next 5 years, but Dong Xingwudi might not. This meant that Dong Xingwudi would become stronger than he was now after next year, and the giant group would get through the period of weakness after the reshuffle more quickly. The first was the giant group. The position of the head of the cabinet had not been decided yet. This position had even become the fiercest battlefield for all parties. The prince group, the giant group, and the academics were all ambitious and had strong figures. If there had been no accident in Beihai, this position should have belonged to Wen Siyuan, the speaker of Beihai. Now, although Wen Siyuan was in a precarious situation, it could not be said that he had no competition for this position. As a result, the situation became more complicated. If it was the academics who finally got this position, it would be okay. Li Huaqing and a new prime minister could completely check and balance Dong Xingwudi. But with Li Huaqing's retention, the academics had little chance, and it was difficult for the one from the giant group to form a real tacit understanding with Li Huaqing. If this position fell into the hands of the giant group or the southeast group, it would be a nightmare. Then Li Huaqing would even face a more difficult situation than now. Shang Wang Qinglei. Chen Fanqing pondered for a long time before asking tentatively. Li Huaqing finally stopped hiding his bitter smile and shook his head slightly. He's not you. Chen Fanqing was silent. Wang Qinglei's current qualifications were sufficient, but he was not Chen Fanqing. That was to say, he was not willing to take this position. His goal was very clear, which was the position of the president 5 years later. How could he give up that position to be the prime minister 5 years in advance? Li Tianlan is the key. Chen Fanqing sighed softly. What a pity. If he could tie Li Tianlan down, he could really change a lot of things. But Li Tianlan did not say anything. It's not necessarily a bad thing that he didn't say anything. Li Huacheng said quietly, at least we still have time to operate now. I just don't know how much the Wang family of Beihai will offer. Wang Yuetong, Chen Fanqing suddenly asked, still can't find her? Li Huacheng's eyes narrowed. No matter how tacit they were, this question was a little too sensitive. He took a deep look at Chen Fanqing and shook his head. I've looked for her, but there's no news. The biggest price of the Wang family of Beihai is probably Wang Yuetong. Chen Fanqing lowered his head and said slowly. A very sharp, killing intent flashed in his eyes. Chapter 799. When the sky just brightened, Wang Shengxiao, who had meditated all night, opened his eyes. Uninvited, he naturally stayed in prison for a night. At dinner yesterday, a prison guard brought him some food, for dishes and a soup, neither good nor bad. Then no one paid attention to the new patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. No one arranged a room for him. The lounge became his guest room. Wang Shengxiao was calm, as if he didn't feel the slightest shame of being ignored. He just waited quietly, waiting for Li Tianlan to meet him. The palace lord of Emperor Dong's palace, and the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. The superiority of the two identities was no longer important here. What was important was that Wang Shengxiao needed Li Tianlan's help, so he had to be humble. Wang Shengxiao had enough psychological preparation on the way here. At breakfast, the prison guard brought the standard prison breakfast. Since he was here, Wang Shengxiao ate some, then closed his eyes to rest, ready for the next negotiation. The morning passed quickly. At lunch, Xiao Mahai, the warden of Desert Prison, finally came to the door of the lounge. He smiled calmly and politely. Mr. Wang, His Highness invites you to have lunch with him. Okay. Wang Shengxiao smiled and thanked Xiao Mahai politely. Xiao Mahai turned and led the way. There was a very exquisite dining hall in the prison that didn't have much spare space. It was not far from the dormitory. When he approached the dining hall, Wang Shengxiao saw Xiao Qing and several prison guards who were busy. They were bringing extremely exquisite dishes into the dining hall, and a plump and beautiful young woman was holding a bottle of good wine that hadn't been opened yet as she walked over. Wang Shengxiao glanced at Xiao Mahai and suddenly felt a little emotional. He chuckled and said, I didn't expect, General, to find the most suitable path for yourself here. In the future, when the palace lord leaves the prison, whether he takes you with him or puts you elsewhere, General can be said to have a high position in the future. I congratulate General in advance. Xiao Mahai smiled calmly and said in a flat tone, I'll follow His Highness's arrangement. It doesn't matter if I stay here for a few more years. Wang Shengxiao glanced at him, nodded, and pushed open the door of the dining room. Li Tianlan sat in the main seat, facing the door, facing a table full of dishes, and kept eating, not waiting for Wang Shengxiao to sit down. He looked relaxed and casual. Wang Shengxiao remained calm, but his eyes had become extremely solemn. Sit. Li Tianlan waved his hand casually and continued eating. His eating speed was very fast, but it did not ruin his image. It was not the kind of person who would devour everything in one bite. Instead, it was a kind of speed, or even a unique sense of rhythm. It was fast, precise, and meticulous. Wang Shengxiao sat down opposite him, looked at him, and did not speak for a while. What do you want to talk to me about? Li Tianlan was eating, but his voice was still clear and stable. Wang Shengxiao didn't seem to expect that the carefully prepared negotiation would turn out like this. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, I hope Beihai can reach a comprehensive strategic cooperation with Emperor Dong's palace. Reason? Li Tianlan asked. I've already told Patriarch Qin the reason yesterday. Wang Shengxiao paused. In fact, when he walked into the restaurant and did not see Qin Wei by, his heart had already sunk slightly. Li Tianlan did not speak. Wang Shengxiao continued, The current development model of Emperor Dong's palace is somewhat similar to that of Beihai province. But the difference is that Emperor Dong's palace is still Emperor Dong's palace, and Xianyuan City can't represent Tiannan for the time being. You still have a long way to go to integrate Emperor Dong's palace and Xianyuan City and annex Tiannan. I don't know if you have read the history of Beihai, but I can responsibly tell you that this process will not be smooth, and it will not be smooth. If you're willing to cooperate with Beihai, Beihai is willing to give you enough support. In 10 or 20 years, Beihai province and the Wang family of Beihai will be the future Emperor Dong's palace in Tiannan. Zhongzhou state will only choose to wait and see if the two forces reach a new balance. He looked at Li Tianlan and solemnly said, "This is good for both of us." "That's not what I want to hear." Li Tianlan paused and looked at Wang Shengxiao. Wang Shengxiao raised his eyebrows. "Talk about the situation, the future, the balance, and the reason. Why do you say this? It's obvious. If you say it, I'll understand it. If you don't say it, I'll understand it. So, it's better not to say it." He lowered his head and sped up his eating. He said blandly, "If the parliament wants to cooperate with me, I only need to nod, and I can quickly replace Kunlun City and become the new god of war of Zhongzhou State. Tiannan will still be the headquarters of Emperor Dong's palace. This is the price they offered. So, you don't have to analyze all kinds of possibilities. Why don't you just tell me what you can give me?" Wang Shengxiao's pupils contracted slightly for a moment. He had already guessed that Zhongzhou State might replace Kunlun City with Emperor Dong's palace. But he did not expect Li Huaqing and Chun Fangqing to be so decisive. He picked up the wine glass in front of him and took a sip. He said in a low voice, "What Zhongzhou State currently gives to Tiannan with the strength of Beihai, I can also give you some weapons and armaments. Although the models are different, there won't be any difference in performance. In terms of connections, we can also build a real network for you and Kunlun City." Li Tianlan looked at Wang Shengxiao and said blandly, "This is what Zhongzhou State can give me. Can you also give it to me?" Wang Shengxiao was silent for a long time. "I can't give you Kunlun City," he said slowly, "but I can give you Tiannan, as long as we reach an agreement. After the Wang family of Beihai temporarily stabilizes the situation, I can help Emperor Dong's palace take over everything in Tiannan. This is the price I can offer." His thoughts gradually became clear. Zhongzhou State gives you Kunlun City because it wants you to return to the old path of the Li family and protect Zhongzhou State. I don't deny the glory and height of the Li family in those days. But compared with Beihai, such a development model has too many restrictions. The Li family's foundation is in Zhongzhou State, but it can never represent Zhongzhou State. I suggest you choose another path, the path of the Wang family of Beihai. Beihai doesn't need to represent Zhongzhou State, but no one is qualified to represent Beihai except us. Tiannan can be the Tiannan of Zhongzhou State, but first of all, it should be your Tiannan first. Not your Tiannan, but first of all, it should be the Tiannan of Zhongzhou State. The two are different, very different. Li Tianlan was silent for a while and nodded. "Very convincing. If we cooperate, what do you need me to do?" Wang Shengxiao looked at Li Tianlan quietly. After a long time, he suddenly asked, "Why don't you tell me what you can do if we cooperate?" Li Tianlan glanced at him and slowly drank a glass of wine. "The chaos of Beihai is around the corner," he said softly. Wang Shengxiao's eyes narrowed, and he nodded. "It's obvious. I can't go to Beihai when it's the most chaotic. I have to stay here. I have to stay in the desert prison. This is what I promised the council." Li Tianlan said slowly, "Under such circumstances, how do you want me to help you?" Chapter 800. In this case, how do you want me to help you? This question was very interesting. It seemed to be a refusal, but it also seemed to be meaningful. Wang Shengxiao was silent for a while and then chuckled. His whole body slowly relaxed, and he looked a little presumptuous and casual. "Your promise to the parliament is meaningless," Wang Shengxiao said quietly. Li Tianlan's eyes did not change, and he said indifferently, "Go on. You're not stupid, and you're not stupid either. Even if you're not being considerate, Chairman Qin will help you think of everything." Wang Shengxiao said, "The parliament hopes that you will go to Beihai province to clean up the mess when or after the chaos in Beihai. But you promised them that you will not go to Beihai. You refused their request for cooperation. At least, you never agreed. You stay in the desert prison and seem to be neutral. You don't want to get involved in this matter, but what good is it for you?" Li Tianlan lowered his head and ate without saying a word. The Wang family of Beihai is in a bad situation now, but how good can Emperor Dong's palace be? It seems to be developing rapidly, but you can't see the crisis behind it. I can be sure that the future development of Xianyuan City will not be smooth. Now, the large amount of assistance provided by Zhongzhou State is based on the situation that everything is still under their control. As you leave the desert prison, Emperor Dong's palace will develop rapidly. And after you want to turn Emperor Dong's palace into another Beihai, Zhongzhou State suppression will follow. Under such circumstances, you didn't agree to cooperate with the parliament. It seems to be neutral, but it will also make the parliament reduce its support for you. You haven't completely finalized the cooperation with Zhongzhou State, and you can't get the support of the Wang family of Beihai. It seems to be neutral, but in fact, it doesn't please either side. You won't do this kind of stupid thing, and Qin Weibai won't do it either. Li Tianlan still did not say a word. "So I'm very happy," Wang Shengxiao said quietly. "I'm very happy that you can make such a promise to Zhongzhou State. Because such a promise, in my opinion, means that you have decided to cooperate with the Wang family of Beihai. You may not leave the prison, but I can be sure that you have enough power to affect the chaos of the Wang family of Beihai. So, we have a good cooperation?" Li Tianlan put down the bowl and chopsticks, wiped his mouth with a tissue, and raised his eyes. "Are you done?" Wang Xingxiao narrowed his eyes and looked straight into Li Tianlan's eyes. "It's a good idea, but it's all wrong." Li Tianlan smiled. "I'm not as complicated as you think, and I'm not as determined as you think. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think what's there to be afraid of. I didn't completely reject Zhongzhou State. I just left some leeway. It's not that I've decided to cooperate with you." His Highness, God of War, Donghuang, Heavenly Sun, they're all bullshit. After all, I'm also immortal, and I'll hesitate. Tian'an is good, and so is Kunlun City. My choice is likely to affect the path of Emperor Dong's palace for many years to come. I haven't made up my mind, so I left some leeway for both sides. Zhongzhou State can give me a lot of benefits. I see you just to give you a chance to persuade me. Otherwise, if I go to Zhongzhou State to talk about cooperation now, the President and the Prime Minister will welcome me 100%, and Zhongzhou State's aid to Tian'an will also be greatly increased. Li Tianlan leaned forward slightly, knocked on the table in front of him, and looked at Wang Shengxiao. There may be a crisis behind Emperor Dong's palace, but it's not impossible to solve. It's just another path, the same glory. I don't need you to tell me which path is better. I have my own judgment. So, from your standpoint, say what you want to say. We can talk, but you should restrain your confidence. Wang Shengxiao sat opposite Li Tianlan and was silent for a long time. Li Tianlan didn't urge him. Wang Shengxiao knew very well that Li Tianlan was waiting for his offer. Even he only had one chance to make an offer. Wang Shengxiao pondered and didn't know what to say for a moment. This was the most critical part of the negotiation. In these few minutes, he had to offer a price that satisfied Li Tianlan once and for all. If it worked, they would have a happy cooperation. If it didn't work, they would drift apart. The pressure was indeed on Wang Shengxiao, because both Tian'an and Kunlun City were good. Regardless of what Li Tianlan thought in his heart, at least the fact was clear that he did have another choice that could be equally glorious. If you stay in the desert prison, what can you do for Beihai when the chaos breaks out in Beihai? Wang Shengxiao asked slowly after pondering for a long time. This kind of cooperation might be long-term, but in the short-term crisis, what could Li Tianlan do to make him think about how to offer a price? "I could do a lot of things." Li Tianlan played with the wine glass in his hand and said casually, "For example, I may be able to give you some of the information you need most now. The giant group can also help you resist some of the pressure from Zhongzhou State. In short, I can do what you need me to do and what you want me to do, provided that you make me feel that it's worth it." Wang Shengxiao's pupils suddenly contracted for a moment. "What you need me to do?" What you want me to do? I can do it. He savored this sentence carefully, and his face gradually turned a little pale. Really? He really needed the information about Li Tianlan and Samsara Palace. He also needed the support of the giant group very much. But in the chaos, what he needed most was Li Tianlan's combat capability. Li Tianlan was in the desert, thousands of miles away from Beihai. How could his combat capability be reflected? Wang Xingxiao didn't believe that Li Tianlan's sword light could cross thousands of miles to fight against an invincible realm expert. He was no longer a chosen one, but an immortal. Unless he directly tore up the promise with the Parliament of Zhongzhou State after agreeing to cooperate. Doing so would not only damage Li Tianlan's reputation, but it would also be too intense. It depends on you, Li Tianlan said blandly. What exactly should I do? Wang Shengxiao asked. Li Tianlan looked up at him. He didn't say anything. Wang Shengxiao gradually understood. He narrowed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then said solemnly, "Everything I just said can be counted as my conditions. I still hold the same view. Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai may be each other's opponents, but they should also be each other's allies. You, me, and Zhongzhou State all need a balance. If you're willing to cooperate, the Wang family of Beihai is willing to do its best to help you take down Tian'an and give you most of the technology and armaments you want. In addition, Beihai also needs the cooperation of Emperor Dong's palace." Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly. "Cooperate with what?" "Cooperate with us to find our new patriarch," Wang Shengxiao said word by word. His voice was a little bitter. "New patriarch?" Li Tianlan's eyes narrowed. "Wang Yuedong." Wang Shengxiao looked at the sumptuous table in front of him, and his voice was a little faint. "Compared with me, my sister is more qualified to lead the current Wang family of Beihai." Li Tianlan was silent for a moment. "Is this condition enough?" Wang Xingxiao stared into Li Tianlan's eyes and asked slowly, "One more thing." Li Tianlan stood up and looked down at Wang Xingxiao. "Go ahead." Wang Xingxiao nodded. Li Tianlan took a deep look at him and walked to the door of the restaurant. When he was about to walk out of the restaurant, he paused and said calmly, "I want the coldness of 9 states." Chapter 801. The helicopter that stayed outside the prison for a night finally left slowly. The desert returned to peace. But Xiao Mahai, who witnessed all this, felt unprecedentedly restless. He personally sent Wang Shengxiao out of the prison and watched him get on the helicopter. He watched the helicopter fly farther and farther away, turning into a small black spot under the scorching sun and finally disappearing completely. This was Li Tianlan's order. But when Li Huaqing and Chen Fangqing left last night, Li Tianlan did not order him to send them off. Did this mean that His Highness had made a choice between Beihai and Zhongzhou State? The flying yellow sand slowly fell from the sky. Xiao Mahai slowly turned around and walked into the prison. Beihai, Zhongzhou State. He knew everything that was happening in the outside world. Although his position was awkward, his identity and status were there. In the entire Zhongzhou State, how many officers at the level of lieutenant general could there be? So he could see some things clearly. But Xiao Mahai couldn't understand Li Tianlan's choice. It was not doubt, but he really couldn't understand. He was not qualified to get in touch with the inside information and the trend of the situation. Naturally, he wouldn't know why choosing Beihai was better than choosing Zhongzhou State. He didn't understand these, but he knew very well that Li Tianlan, Wang Shengxiao, Dong Chengwudi, Li Huaqing, Chen Fangqing, the young and old people standing at the top of the 6 groups in Zhongzhou State had begun to build a magnificent stage. There was bound to be a place for him on this stage. Xiao Mahai smiled contentedly. When he was about to enter the prison gate, he turned around and looked at the blazing sun outside. This world. In another year, it would be the era of Dongwang. Everyone in Emperor Dong's palace would stand on this stage. If he had a choice, Xiao Mahai still wanted to stand by Li Tianlan's side. He didn't stay here. He turned around and strode into the prison. In the dining room, Li Tianlan's meal was not over yet. The dishes on the table were almost wiped out. Li Tianlan lowered his head and slowly stirred the thick soup in front of him. He left. Seeing Xiao Mahai come in, Li Tianlan asked softly. Yes. Xiao Mahai nodded and said, It seems that he was satisfied when he left. I'm satisfied too. A voice rang out abruptly. Xiao Mahai turned his head subconsciously. In her sight, Li Tianlan's mobile phone was on the dining table, and the screen was on. A handsome middle-aged man with an unusually sharp aura was sitting quietly in his seat. Looking at his background, it seemed that he was in a ward. Xiao Mahai took a closer look. The person on the phone looked like he was in his 30s or 40s. He was handsome and could even be said to be a real beauty. However, this person's aura was too strong. It was sharp, heavy, and unpredictable, so much so that people could not help but admire him. Subconsciously ignoring his appearance, he sat quietly in his seat and looked at Xiao Mahai. His smile was light, but it revealed an indescribable confidence and majesty. This kind of bearing was indescribable, but it was unforgettable. Xiao Mahai opened his mouth. Of course, he knew the man in the phone. Now, in the entire Zhongzhou state, even if people of a certain status had not seen him, they must have heard of his name. But when the words reached his mouth, he didn't know what to say. Let me introduce myself, General Xiao. I'm a holy disciple, Wei Kunlun. In the phone, holy disciple's gentle and generous voice sounded. Currently, I'm Li Tianlan's deputy. Your Excellency, Deputy Palace Master. Xiao Mahai bowed slightly. He never minded being humble to the people around Li Tianlan. I've heard a lot about you. You're welcome, General. You've been with His Highness for so long, and His Highness is very satisfied with you. Maybe in a year or two, when you come out of prison, I'll have to call you leader. Holy Disciple laughed and said, Guess what His Highness just talked to me about? Xiao Mahai subconsciously turned his head and glanced at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan lowered his head and drank his soup calmly. Xiao Mahai wisely said nothing. His Highness talked to me about several positions. There will probably be changes in the Army headquarters next year. Secretary General Bai will be promoted to the Parliament, and the position of Deputy Secretary General of the Army headquarters will be vacant. Minister Dongsheng will definitely take it. In addition, Marshal Yi will probably go further next year, and he will also have to give up the position of General Staff Headquarters. This position is very sensitive. The Border Control Corps has also made some big moves recently. They're all old subordinates of Minister Dongsheng, and he knows them very well. Minister Dongsheng plans to move them in the near future. Thunder God is probably going to move. The Blood Battalion is close to Tiannan, and this position will also be vacant. In the Navy, the male general is probably going to be transferred, and the adjustment is not small. Xiao Mahai listened to all this with his mouth agape. Deputy Secretary General of the Army Headquarters, Chief of General Staff, Commander of the Blood Battalion, and Commander of the Navy. 4 positions, and they were 4 positions of terrifying value. 2 of them were at the peak of lieutenant generals, and they could even be promoted to admiral. And the other 2 were real admirals, especially the second one. If he did well, he might even become a marshal. What did this mean? Well, Xiao Mahai opened his mouth and didn't know what to say. These 4 positions are more suitable. You choose one. Li Tianlan said slowly, You can choose whatever you want, but the General Staff Headquarters is a little difficult. You don't have enough experience, but now there is still time, so you can start. The Chief of the General Staff of Zhongzhou State. This was definitely the military general at the peak of Zhongzhou State. Xiao Mahai's heart beat fiercely a few times. He did think that following Li Tianlan would change his current embarrassing situation. But he never dreamed that this change would be so drastic. For positions, no matter which one he chose, it could be said to be a real step to the top. The General Staff Headquarters? He was the first to rule out this option. This was the most prominent position, but it had always been the backyard of the Southeast Group. If the cooperation between the 2 sides changed in the future, it would inevitably put Li Tianlan in a difficult position if he occupied this position. The Navy? It sounded quite good, but he didn't think he had the strength of General Nan. In his opinion, if Thunder God wanted to move, it was the most suitable to replace General Nan. The position of Deputy Secretary General of the Army Headquarters was undoubtedly quite good, and the hidden power was unimaginable. Moreover, if he went to the Army Headquarters, his boss would be by Qing Zhao, and his immediate boss would be Dongsheng Wudi. He could completely cooperate with the two big shots to control the Army Headquarters. And the Blood Battalion was in Nanyang Province. It was close to Tianan. If he chose the Blood Battalion, he could directly support Emperor Dong's palace and the Freedom Corps in the future. Xiao Mahai's mouth was dry, and he was so nervous that his whole body was trembling. Saint looked at him playfully and didn't speak. "Don't worry," Li Tianlan said lightly. "You can take your time to think about it." Xiao Mahai hesitated and seemed to make up his mind. He smiled bitterly and said, "Your Highness, at the beginning, I did have the idea of using you to leave the desert prison. But to be honest, I'm not sure where I should go after leaving the desert prison. I still have some self-knowledge. In terms of ability, I have it, but I'm not the best. Let me go to these 4 positions. I should be able to do a good job, but I feel like I'm treading on thin ice every day. I don't think I like this kind of feeling." Li Tianlan took a sip of the soup and agreed. Xiao Mahai smiled and scratched his head. "But the Deputy Palace Master said that your Highness is very satisfied with me. I think I've done a good job by your Highness's side. If possible, your Highness, I'd better stay with you. I don't want the position of Lieutenant General. I'll follow you to deal with some small things." Saint raised his eyebrows slightly. Li Tianlan raised his head and glanced at Xiao Mahai. Xiao Mahai's eyes were calm. Everything he said and did came from the bottom of his heart. There was no need to lie. Li Tianlan looked at him for a while. "You don't want any of these 4 positions?" Li Tianlan asked. "In fact, these 4 positions are very good. It can even be said that they are all my dreams." Xiao Mahai smiled cheekily and cheekily said, "But compared with the positions beside your Highness, these 4 positions suddenly don't look good." Li Tianlan. Saint burst out laughing. "Well said. Get out." Li Tianlan laughed and scolded him. He kicked Xiao Mahai and said, "Give me a bowl of soup." Xiao Mahai smiled and turned to walk out of the restaurant. "From today on, you are the butler of Emperor Dong's palace." Li Tianlan looked at his back and said slowly. Chapter 802. Xiao Mahai's figure disappeared at the door of the dining room. His back was light and cheerful, and everyone could see that he was happy and satisfied from the bottom of his heart. He had never thought that he needed to be in a high position in his life. It was important to have self-knowledge and self-control. It just so happened that Xiao Mahai had both of these qualities. He was capable, but not at the top. He was ambitious, but not too ambitious. The military rank of Major General and the position of Commander of the Army Group. At that time, Xiao Mahai's biggest wish was nothing more than to go further and become a Lieutenant General, or at most a Lieutenant General with a higher title. When he came to the desert prison, his military rank was promoted by 1 level, and he guarded the yellow sand for thousands of miles. His biggest ambition was nothing more than to leave here and not be looked down upon. That was all. Deputy Secretary General of the Army Headquarters, Chief of the General Staff, Commander of the Navy of Zhongzhou State, Commander of the Blood Battalion. Each of these positions was more prominent than the other. These were all figures standing at the top of the military. Xiao Mahai believed that he was qualified for these positions, but just as he said, he was cautious and conscientious, as if he was walking on thin ice. This was not the feeling he liked. These positions were too heavy, and he felt that they were not suitable for him. He just wanted to leave the desert prison. If he could follow Li Tianlan, that would be the best. Not to mention Li Tianlan's future position. Even now, his position was not bad if he followed Li Tianlan. It didn't matter if he was a butler, a servant, or a servant. In more than a year, he didn't feel that Li Tianlan looked down on him. As long as Li Tianlan didn't look down on him, no one dared to look down on him at all. He was the butler of Emperor Dong's palace. He was really competent for this position, and he could do it very happily. This was the best situation. Li Tianlan watched his back disappear, shook his head slightly, glanced at Saint on the screen of the mobile phone, and whispered, "I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing that he has no ambition. I don't know what he thinks, But even if he is content with the status quo, his current choice is not a loss. Saint laughed. He had already known everything about Xiao Mahai, and he was also very satisfied with Li Tianlan's arrangement. To expand the territory, he naturally needed ambitious generals, and the most important thing for the people around him was to be content. Xiao Mahai was undoubtedly well-behaved. Don't look down on yourself and Emperor Dong's palace. The chief steward of Emperor Dong's palace has a high status now. Can you imagine what the chief steward of Emperor Dong's palace will be like in 10 years? What about 20 years later? At that time, the position of general might not necessarily be enough to exchange for the position of butler, let alone the position of chief butler. Li Tianlan nodded. Now that you mention it, I'm looking forward to it. Saint smiled. His eyes were drifting, and he seemed to be yearning. He had seen a dynasty that truly belonged to a person. Even though he had only seen it in a blue notebook, seeing it. He knew very well what the housekeeper of such a dynasty meant to the entire dark world. The only pity was that in the dynasty he saw, the chief butler was not Xiao Mahai. How are your injuries? Li Tianlan asked suddenly. Saint did not participate in the fighting and games and the chaos of Eastern Europe, but he was also seriously injured. Not only him, but military counselor, Azura, and general, the three supermasters of Samsara Palace, were also seriously injured. Saint, military advisor, general, Azura. They were the strongest 4 of the 12 supermasters of Samsara Palace. Their injuries all came from the sword of summer solstice when they raided Mount Dibbing. Just one sword. Azura and general were out of danger not long ago. Their vital signs gradually stabilized, and they were still in a coma. Although military counselor was still walking in the outside world, he had never fought with anyone since then. He was like an ordinary person, and it was not until recently that he began to slowly recover. After that, Saint chose to recuperate in Lin. Finally, he broke through to the invincible realm in Linen, but his breakthrough was too intense. Instead of healing, his injuries got worse. Li Tianlan was not sure if he had recovered after more than a year. It's okay, Saint said thoughtfully. It's not a big problem to fight with others, but it will take some time to recover. Would delay the progress? Li Tianlan frowned. Saint was 40 years old this year. It was not too early for him to break through to the invincible realm at the age of 39. In a few years, his physical peak would pass. In the case of physical decline, it was extremely difficult to go further. Not everyone could be like Wang Tianzong. The next few years were critical for Saint. If his injuries were not healed, it would be difficult for him to completely stabilize his realm and rush into the peak of the invincible realm. It's not a big problem, Saint said slowly. There is still time, and my injuries are almost healed. At the very least, at this stage, my strength is enough. As for the future, Emperor Dong's palace doesn't care about my strength, but yours. If you are invincible in the world, it doesn't matter if I stop here. Li Tianlan frowned and didn't say much. It seemed that since he entered the desert prison, the expectations of the people around him were too high, so high that even they themselves were a little negative. But such feelings, Li Tianlan had no solution at the moment. This was a problem of mentality which could not be solved in a few words. And for some reason, Li Tianlan always felt that there was some special reason for this kind of negativity, especially military counselor and Saint. I heard that something happened in Beihai. Saint was silent for a while and asked slowly. This was not a rumor anymore. The general change was around the corner. The president and the prime minister went to the desert prison in person. Wang Shengxiao deliberately collided with them. Everyone knew that something would happen in Beihai in the near future, but few people knew what would happen for the time being. Beihai, it's going to be chaotic, Li Tianlan said softly. What about the specifics? Sam was a little curious. The Vatican, East Island, the Zhang family of South America. Li Tianlan gave a sarcastic smile. It's probably these people. One of the key points should have something to do with Wang Qinglei, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that if these people invade the Wang family of Beihai, it will definitely be a big trouble for Wang Shengxiao now. The Vatican, East Island, The Jiang family of South America, Saint narrowed his eyes. More than one invincible realm expert, so they need me, Li Tianlan said calmly. Saint glanced at him and nodded. I'll go there then. Although his realm was not stable, he could already fight with others. At this time, he naturally could not flinch. No need. Li Tianlan shook his head. You stay in a hospital to take care of the wounded. I don't want the hospital to be attacked a second time. What about Beihai? Saint hesitated for a moment. Leave it to me, Li Tianlan said calmly and looked at his watch. He looked at his watch and said, in a few hours, Wang Xingxiao will probably arrive in Yuzhou. Contact military counselor and sort out some information that Wang Xingxiao needs and give it to him. Then leave the hospital for a while and go to Beihai. Come back at night. To Beihai? Saint frowned. I'll go. He was a new invincible realm expert in Zhongzhou State. His every move was watched by everyone. Now, he contacted Wang Xingxiao with great fanfare and even went to Beihai with him. When the news came out, one could imagine the shock. Yes, to Beihai. Li Tianlan's voice was resolute, and his pupils were extremely hot. Help me bring back coldness of 9 states. He paused and continued. The sooner, the better. I can't wait. Chapter 803. Saint raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at Li Tianlan seriously. He nodded slowly and said, I can leave at any time. Since he became the deputy palace lord of Emperor Dong's palace, or even since he knew Li Tianlan, it was the first time he had seen such eagerness and expectation in Li Tianlan. Take back the coldness of the 9 states. The murderous weapon that had been broken by Xianyuan Feng in Eastern Europe. The divine weapon that could control the sword intent of the Chosen One. For the time being, Saint could not imagine how amazing the changes would be after Li Tianlan obtained the coldness of 9 states. But he understood the cause and effect between Xianyuan Feng and the coldness of 9 states. Now it seemed that Li Tianlan had also realized something. Wang Xingxiao is willing to use the coldness of 9 states as a bargaining chip. Saint smiled and didn't know what to say. This seemed to be a huge price to pay, but it wasn't too big. But no matter what, Wang Xingxiao's choice this time was decisive enough, even decisive. The predecessor of coldness of 9 states was the human emperor, the first murderous weapon that had shaken the dark world for hundreds of years. In order to have a divine weapon that could fully unleash his sword intent, Wang Tianzong decisively cast the human emperor into the coldness of the 9 states. There was actually no difference. After all, the material was the same. The only thing that changed was the shape. The energy requirements of the coldness of the 9 states would not change. In this state, the coldness of the 9 states could bear Wang Tianzong's sword energy and could also be used as a murderous weapon. There might be some trade-offs, but this was obviously not something that Saint could know. Therefore, when the human emperor became the coldness of the 9 states, it might be slightly different from the human emperor, but in essence, it was still a murderous weapon and something that Xianyuan Feng needed. For the Wang family of Beihai, the role of the human emperor was not significant in the following period. During the final battle of Heaven Capital, human emperor had already opened fire on the border of Zhongzhou State. The transformation from Ren Huang to coldness of 9 states had exhausted the energy accumulated over the past 3 years. Moreover, after coldness of 9 states was cut off by Xianyuan Feng, it was not easy to repair it. If he kept coldness of 9 states, it could be expected that within 10 years, this divine weapon would not be of much use. Now, the Wang family of Beihai was betting on the next few years. They wanted to get through this crisis. When Wang Tianzong recovered from his injury, it would be a new world. Therefore, Wang Xingxiao handed over the coldness of 9 states, which was temporarily useless to North Sea, without any hesitation. Li Tianlan replied with a and did not express any opinion. He just subconsciously adjusted his sitting posture. His heart was obviously not calm, which was an extremely rare emotion for him. He had the kind of anticipation and restlessness that didn't want to wait for even a second longer. When he was a child, he stood in the camp of the Li family and looked up at the star flag and thought about the future of the Li family. Soon after he came to Huading at the beginning of the year, he came out of the Sky Academy and was pushed onto the sofa by Qin Weibai in that villa. Then it was now Coldness of the Nine States. Human Emperor. It belonged to the Wang family of Beihai, but Xin Yuanfeng was his. He had enough power to decide Xin Yuanfeng's direction. Li Tianlan subconsciously raised his hand and clenched it. The saints were slightly stunned when they saw this posture. This posture didn't seem like he was holding a sword. In a trance, it felt like he was holding the entire world in his hands. Li Tianlan looked at Saint calmly and said, "Don't let anything happen." Saint's heart trembled, and he nodded solemnly. "Don't worry." Li Tianlan hung up the video call and looked in the direction of Beihai, waiting for the broken coldness of 9 states. The Xianyuan sword appeared beside him and slowly rotated around him. Li Tianlan stared deeply at the sword, and his eyes sparkled. This kind of light was just like the first time Li Huacheng saw him. With light footsteps, Qin Weibai walked into the restaurant with a bowl of soup. Her soft, casual clothes made her look indescribably lazy, and her ruddy face was more charming and enchanting than before. Wang Shengxiao left. Qin Weibai placed the soup in front of Li Tianlan and asked curiously. Li Tianlan nodded silently and said, "What about Xiao Mahai? I happened to meet him, so I ordered lunch and asked him to go to the kitchen to prepare." Qin Weibai leaned against Li Tianlan and said lazily, "How was Beihai's offer?" "Very good," Li Tianlan said bluntly. "It was done in one step, better than expected." "What's better?" Qin Weibai glanced at Li Tianlan curiously. "Coldness of 9 states." Li Tianlan said quietly, "This is the condition I added," and Wang Shengxiao agreed. Qin Weibai's eyes lit up, and she sat up straight. "So, can Xin Yuanfeng evolve again?" "It still needs some research, but the human emperor is relatively special among the murderous weapons. If all murderous weapons come from a piece of metal, the human emperor is closer to the core of that piece of metal, like a heart, and has strong energy." Li Tianlan glanced at Qin Weibai. He said softly, "When he fought with Xin Yuanfeng in the desert, he discovered Xin Yuanfeng's secret. When he came back, he asked Qin Weibai about it in detail, but Qin Weibai said that she did not know what was going on. Li Tianlan did not meditate for the past 2 nights, nor did he study Xin Yuanfeng. He was busy bullying Qin Weibai, so how could he have time to care about this? But what was certain was that Xin Yuanfeng did need the energy of the murderous weapon in any case. "Is there enough time?" Qin Weibai thought for a while and asked softly. "It should be about time." Li Tianlan thought for a while and said, "Zhongzhou State still needs some time to prepare. As for Beihai, we can slow down the information we provide him. It's not a big problem." Qin Weibai answered obediently and suddenly asked, "What will change this time?" Li Tianlan paused and shook his head. "It should make it more complete, right? What about for you?" Qin Weibai looked at Li Tianlan with quiet eyes. "What about for Beihai?" "For me, it's not very useful, but for Beihai, it's critical." He looked out the window at the endless yellow sand, thinking about when the situation would break out. After a long silence, he said softly, "I'm going to raise the sword. Then I'll stay here with you." Qin Weibai smiled sweetly. He couldn't accompany her more, so she would stay with him. Li Tianlan smiled and gently touched Qin Weibai's hair. "Don't mess it up." Qin Weibai scratched the back of Li Tianlan's hand and took care of her casually tied black hair. Li Tianlan snapped his fingers. In the subtle light, a subtle light flickered and slowly extended. Finally, it turned into a crystal clear rose that looked beautiful and gorgeous. "This is..." Qin Weibai opened her eyes wide and looked at Li Tianlan. For a moment, she even forgot to breathe. She looked at Li Tianlan and then at the rose. The look in her eyes became more and more complicated. The footsteps of fate seemed to come with an irresistible force. Many years ago, or many years later, the man named Dongqing Huangtu was brought over by this force. And now, Li Tianlan finally came to this step. The crystal rose sparkled in Li Tianlan's hand. All the details became more and more perfect, vivid, like the most exquisite work of art, priceless. Li Tianlan gently inserted the rose into Qin Weibai's hair, nodded with satisfaction, and said with a smile, "It's beautiful." Chapter 804. Qin Weibai gently touched the rose on her head. Her eyes were pure and soft. "This is the first time you've sent me flowers." She smiled gently. The delicate, illusory rose exuded real warmth in her hand. Qin Weibai looked very happy. "I like it very much. If there's a chance in the future, I will give you all the flowers in the world." Li Tianlan's voice was soft, and he made an almost absurd promise. But his eyes were serious and persistent. Qin Weibai was in a trance for a moment. She remembered a story from many years ago. The man who had been almost invincible once promised so. Divine weapons should be given to heroes, and flowers should be matched with beauties. He said he would give her all the roses in the world at their wedding. That year, the warrant signed by His Majesty dynasty spread throughout the dark world and all the countries in the world that produced roses. That year, roses became a luxury all over the world. That year, there was a rain of flowers. From Zhongzhou State to Italy, across the two continents of Europe and Asia, across mountains and seas, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, countless rose petals were scattered in the sky for tens of thousands of miles, covering the earth and the sea, from Zhongzhou State all the way to the Holy Land. It was an indescribable rain of flowers. It was romantic, but with an absolute scorching madness and love. But ironically, the groom who did all this did not find his bride at the end. The colorful rain of flowers fell on the earth and the sea, and finally dissipated in the earth and the deep sea. Qin Weibai lowered her head and whispered, "This time, I only need one flower." "That's enough." "Not enough." Li Tianlan shook his head. Qin Weibai pulled the chair closer to Li Tianlan and finally leaned into his arms. The rose was quiet in her hair. It was so exquisite that it was almost unreal, but it really existed, so real that it was a little unreal. Li Tianlan put his arm around her shoulder and touched the rose with the other hand. In a slight sound, a string of equally beautiful and incredible crystals appeared where the petals were connected. The crystals fell on the rose and swayed gently with Qin Weibai's breath, looking much more vivid. "It's beautiful," Li Tianlan whispered. Qin Weibai looked up at Li Tianlan and reached out to touch his face. Her eyes were blurred, and she giggled. "Do you want me to reward you again?" Li Tianlan was a little excited, but that was it. Agitated, he shook his head and teased, "I've been squeezed dry by you. Bad people." Qin Weibai gently grabbed Li Tianlan's ear and whispered, "It's you who bullied me." Li Tianlan grabbed her little hand and kissed it. He whispered, "Old Xiao is here." Qin Weibai's eyes became clear for a moment, and she sat up straight. Xiao Mahai walked over with a box of food, his face full of smiles. Li Tianlan scooped a bowl of soup for himself and accompanied Qin Weibai to drink unhurriedly. "Xiao Qing is not bad," he suddenly said. "Follow Xiao Bai from now on. She needs someone to take care of her while she's here." Xiao Mahai was stunned and nodded subconsciously. Then he said hesitantly, "Your Highness, you've my sister. Put away your messy thoughts and tell her to go back. She's already married. What's the point of sending me to my side?" Li Tianlan shook his head. "I don't need anyone to take care of me. I'm going to be quiet for a while. Find me a dormitory later. You don't have to deliberately arrange anything. You'll be in charge of my meals from now on." "Okay." Xiao Mahai nodded subconsciously. He wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. Li Tianlan didn't explain anything. His time in the desert prison had entered a countdown. At the latest, 1 year. At the shortest, he would leave here in a few months. There was not much time left for him. He needed to adjust his state so that he could truly stand in his current peak state. Whether it was for Emperor Dong's palace or for the chaos that the Wang family of Beihai would face next, he needed to make a choice and face everything with the strongest posture. So he had to raise his sword. The Lin clan was hidden from the world, and the current patriarch of the Lin clan was now sitting beside him obediently. After leaving the desert prison, Li Tianlan had to let everyone know that in the dark world, Whether it was clear sky or shadow, he was the real number one person in the dark world. Xiao Mahai turned and left the restaurant. Qin Weibai sat beside him and ate rice. She whispered, "Do you feel the pressure?" "What pressure?" Li Tianlan was a little confused. "The Vatican, the Jiang family of South America, East Island," Qin Weibai said softly. "If you were in a state you were in a year ago, even with Xianyuan Feng, your strength would be slightly worse than Moraid's. You should be on par with Tianhai Wuji and slightly better than Yagyu Kuromi. Of course, if you go all out, the result is hard to say. As for now," she paused and whispered, "Beihai's current situation is not very optimistic. If you want to carry it by yourself, you will be under a lot of pressure." "It's okay." Li Tianlan smiled. After all, Qin Weibai didn't understand martial arts. These analyses came from others, so it was inevitable that they were not accurate enough. Even if they were accurate, it was him and Xianyuan Feng a year ago, not now. "It's okay. Don't worry," he said softly. Qin Weibai hesitated and whispered, "It's not that we can't find help." "Who?" Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. He knew some invincible realm experts who were willing to help him, but now there was basically no one who could help. Tribulation was unconscious, and Situ Tsangyue had not recovered from her serious injury. After all, Saint represented Mount Shu. He could become the deputy palace master of Emperor Dong's palace, but it was not appropriate for him to participate in the affairs of Beihai. Only he could come forward. Northern Europe, the Dark Nights. Qin Weibai whispered, "Flaming fire is there, and the palace master hasn't." She hesitated and continued. "Before the palace master died, Flaming Fire played the role of the master of Samsara Palace unless it was necessary. Her strength is not bad. Even if she can't compare with Moraid, at least she is enough to hold Yagyu Kurumi, and your pressure will be much less." Flaming Fire. Li Tianlan murmured to himself and whispered, "How are she and Alpha?" Alpha has woken up, but it's hard for him to recover from his serious injury in a short time. Flaming Fire's injury is basically healed, but she rarely contacts us. The palace master died. She is angry with you, me, and many people. But if you are in trouble, she will definitely help." Qin Weibai whispered. Li Tianlan was silent for a while and finally shook his head. "No, I can solve it. Don't be careless." Qin Weibai stared at Li Tianlan's face. If there were no accidents, the next year or two would be the most critical period for Li Tianlan. She didn't want any accidents to happen to him. In the current dark world, there are very few people who are qualified to be your enemy, but each of them is not easy to deal with. "You're wrong." Li Tianlan looked at her quietly. "Everyone who thinks so is wrong." His tone was calm, but there was extreme confidence between the lines. That was not arrogance. It was pure confidence. "There are no enemies under my sword." Li Tianlan whispered, "Only non-entities." Chapter 805. After lunch, Xiao Mahai had already prepared a new dormitory for Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan was very satisfied with it. He ordered that the prison would not entertain outsiders in the near future. He simply shook Qin Weibai's hand, and then began his sword training career that might last for a few months or even a year. Both Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai had absolute confidence in the sword that they had nurtured for a long time and the firmest will. Qin Weibai returned to Li Tianlan's original dormitory. The air in the dormitory still lingered with the lingering scent of romance. She opened the window, sat in front of the computer, thought for a moment, and entered a website. Layers of passwords completely isolated all the possibility of being tracked and monitored. A complicated and exquisite web page appeared in front of Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai pursed her lips, and her dreamy perfect face was calm and rational. She quickly issued a series of orders. On the web page, windows popped up one after another and quickly closed. After doing all this, Qin Weibai opened the communication subsystem of the website and sent a few invitations with her slender fingers. Saint's figure appeared on the communication screen first. The screen began to separate. It separated into 3 small screens. Saint was in the middle. Qin Weibai glanced at him and nodded. The next second, the screen on the left lit up and military counselor greeted them with an easygoing smile. "I thought you were at the airport now." Saint glanced at military counselor and raised his eyebrows. "I did. It's not a big deal. Why would I go there? If there is something, it can't be said in an occasion like the airport." Military counselor shook his head carelessly and suddenly laughed. "Are you bored? One is in the hospital, and the other is in the prison. I found a good game recently, and I recommend it to you." Saint looked at his careless state and shook his head. Hua Jingyang, one of the 9 counselors of Zhongzhou State and the leader of the academics, the vice minister of the cabinet, made a high-profile inspection of Huading, and before his departure, he hoped to have a more in-depth discussion with military counselor. Everyone could see that military counselor was Hua Jingyang's key goal this time. However, when it came to military counselor, it became not a big deal, even less important than his game. "It's not necessary," Qin Weibai said blandly. "Even if you want to express your attitude, you don't have to deliberately snub him. After all, he is a director of Zhongzhou State. What's the benefit of offending him? Of course, I would have dealt with him in the past, but now I'm really too lazy to do anything. So what if I offend him? Wait for me to back off. If I do, I'll be like a wild crane, and I can't be bothered to serve these so-called giants." The military advisor shook his head. Saint wanted to say something, but stopped. In the end, he did not say anything. Qin Weibai stopped talking. The third small screen on the screen was temporarily unconnected, and the screen was pitch black. "How's Qianlan's negotiation with them?" Military counselor asked. "We've temporarily stabilized the council." Qin Weibai looked at the screen that was still dark and said slowly, "Tianlan has decided to cooperate with the Wang family of Beihai. The Wang family of Beihai has agreed to all the conditions we expected and used the broken coldness of 9 states as a bargaining chip. Tianlan has begun to raise the sword. What changes will there be?" Military counselor's eyes lit up. Without a doubt, he was asking about the changes that the coldness of 9 states had made to Xinyuan Feng. Qin Weibai did not say anything. She glanced at Saint. She really did not understand martial arts. Although Li Tianlan's current realm was low, his sword intent had touched the end of martial arts. Even if she understood martial arts, she could not say what the so-called changes would be. Only Saint could understand a little. It was not because he was an invincible realm expert. It was because he was Saint. The changes are not that big. Saint thought for a moment and analyzed all kinds of possibilities. But it should be crucial to Beihai. It depends on how well the palace master raises the sword. It's nothing more than the difference between the power of one sword and the power of one person. Qin Weibai subconsciously touched the rose on her head. She touched the petals and could feel that Li Tianlan was watching the conversation here through the rose. Qin Weibai smiled and felt a little relieved. "What is this?" Military counselor looked at the rose and was a little curious. "Where did you buy it?" "Give me one too, but I want lilies. I want some lilies." "This is the palace master's eyes," Saint said with a faint smile. "Even if he is not here, he can see your every move now. So, if you talk about retiring or something, be careful that he will really beat you up when he sees you." Saint's face stiffened for a moment. He gave a hollow laugh and said, "Hello, hello, Your Highness." The incredibly delicate rose moved, and the crystal on its stem shook slightly, becoming more and more vivid. Click! A faint noise suddenly rang out. There was an intermittent sound from the third small screen. The screen was still dark, but it showed that it was connected. A somewhat hoarse voice sounded. It seemed to deliberately hide its voice. "What's the matter?" Saint and military counselor were quiet for a moment. Qin Weibai's eyes flickered, and she asked, "How was the situation in Beihai?" In the dark screen, the voice was silent for a moment, and then he laughed in a low voice. "The undercurrent is turbulent. I have confirmed the whereabouts of more than 2,000 people, all of whom are elites. The Jiang family of South America, Knights Templars, Jifeng's sword reigning school, and Wuji Palace all have elites lurking. It can be said that these families have put in a lot of effort. According to our analysis, in a few months, they can even stuff tens of thousands of people in Beihai, maybe even more. Tens of thousands of elites are at least in the ice-condensing realm. How large of a Beihai core can they be? He paused and tooted. For Beihai Province, this is definitely a disaster, and it can even be said to be the only disaster in their history. More than 10,000 people, military counselor frowned. It's not easy to hide so many people. No matter how Wang Xiaoyao manages, it can't be foolproof. These people can't lurk for long, and they will definitely be exposed. What does that matter? In the dark screen, the man laughed in a low voice. Even if they're exposed, the Wang family of Beihai can't deal with so many people in a short time. At that time, the whole Beihai will be covered with blood, and the trust of Beihai people in the Beihai government and Mount Dibbing will drop to the lowest point. The 7 sword-holding families will suffer heavy losses or even be completely wiped out. These things only need an outbreak, not a tug-of-war. It's hard for Beihai to react. Once it happens, Zhongzhou State can forcefully intervene in everything in Beihai. There's nothing more perfect than this. Saint and military counselor were silent. Qin Weibai was also silent. After a long time, Qin Weibai breathed a sigh of relief and said calmly, "Don't think Beihai is too simple." Yes, the hoarse voice was non-committal. What's the attitude of the Samsara Palace? Hua Jingyang's inspection of Huoding should be from military counselor, right? They attach great importance to you, except for 3 visits to the thatched cottage. Our attitude is Qianlon's attitude. Qin Weibai's voice was cold. Your young master is ready to fully cooperate with the Wang family of Beihai. After a short silence, the voice murmured, "Fully cooperate?" "Yes." Qin Weibai nodded. "Fully cooperate." "Tricky." In the dark, he said in a deep voice. "So Tianlong needs time. Today, I need you to hand over to military counselor. Whether it's intelligence or resources, we can share them. In any case, we must temporarily stop the actions of the major forces." Chapter 806. Saint had always been a very generous person. He would never hide anything that was destined to be unconcealable. Therefore, after confirming the relationship between Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai, Saint had directly contacted Wang Shengxiao an hour before his helicopter arrived in Yuzhou. Wang Shengxiao was even more generous. The most convenient thing about helicopters was that they didn't have to land at the airport. As the rotors whistled, the helicopter landed directly on the hospital's helipad. Wang Shengxiao walked out of the cabin and looked at Saint with a smile. Saint nodded. Both sides seemed satisfied with each other's attitude. "Your Highness, if there's nothing else, shall we depart now?" Wang Shengxiao asked directly, without any nonsense or courtesy. If they set off now, they could catch up with dinner when they arrived at Mount Dibbing. "Sure." After saying that, Saint walked directly into the helicopter. The helicopter started to take off. Under the gaze of numerous people, it whizzed across the sky of Yuzhou province. They came and went in a hurry. This was the first time Wang Shengxiao had come to Yuzhou since he became the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. It took less than 5 minutes, but he took away the only new invincible realm expert in Zhongzhou State. This news swept over the entire Yuzhou city like a hurricane. Before the helicopter left Yuzhou province, some big figures in high places had already known this news. Everyone's attention was not on Saint. Saint boarded the plane of the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai and headed for Beihai province. Countless people were guessing the intentions of a young prodigy who was temporarily imprisoned in the desert prison. The president, the prime minister, and the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai went to the desert prison at the same time, but no one knew the specific results for the time being. The actions of the saints were like a signal that made many people start to think about various possibilities. Chen Fanqing once again appeared in the golden autumn pavilion of the Hidden Dragon Sea, which was known as the office of the president. Li Huaqing pushed away a meeting that had already been arranged and personally received Chen Fanqing. The spacious office was filled with the fragrance of tea. The 2 giants who stood at the peak of Zhongzhou State sat face to face. The atmosphere was silent and depressing, gloomy and a little scary. What does that mean? Chen Fanqing remained silent for a long time before asking softly. Probing. Li Huaqing's voice was calm. But even the usually calm expression in his eyes now had a hint of fear. There was a dark haze. Pro. Chen Fanqing raised an eyebrow. Non-committal. I don't think he can make up his mind in such a short time. What can North Sea give him? Unless Wang Shengxiao is willing to give him the entire Beihai. Li Huaqing said lightly. Chen Fanqing leaned back and rubbed his temples. He let out a long sigh, not hiding his exhaustion at all. Li Tianlan and Wang Shengxiao. Mount Dibing, East Imperial Palace. Two people and two forces really took up too much of his energy. This was really related to the future pattern of Zhongzhou State. His expectations were so great that he was even unwilling to bear any bad risks. To be honest, Chen Fanqing's mentality was out of balance. He knew this, but he couldn't control his irritation. Comrade Jingyang inspected Huading, but the one in Huading didn't go to the airport. Does this mean that he's not optimistic about our operation? It can even be said that some international powers are not optimistic about our operation. Chen Fanqing said softly. Maybe he's just not willing to take too many risks. In the field he's best at, the Wang family of Beihai is no weaker than him, or even stronger. And we can never give too many benefits to people like him, let alone some core things. So it's understandable that he's not willing to get involved. Li Huaqing's voice was flat. Then why did Saint leave with Wang Shengxiao? Chen Fanqing's eyes were gloomy. We just came back. If Wang Shengxiao didn't talk to Li Tianlan, how could Saint be so blatant? Probe? Does he really think that Zhongzhou State can't punish him now? Li Huaqing glanced at him silently and said with a poker face, What are you going to do? The other party has made a move. No matter what his purpose is, we can't do nothing. Chen Fanqing said flatly, Some plans for Tianan can be implemented. They want to help, but we must reduce it appropriately to show Li Tianlan our determination and attitude. Suspend the supply of some weapons and armaments that have been finalized recently. Li Huaqing frowned. At this time, if we act too aggressively, we can only let him get closer to Beihai, then continue to reduce the aid. Chen Fanqing was expressionless. At the same time, speed up the plan for Beihai. He hasn't broken through to the invincible realm, and his combat capability is limited. The strength of Emperor Dong's palace is also limited. Besides, he has promised us that he will stay in prison during the chaos in Beihai. In this case, let the chaos in Beihai break out earlier. Are you worried that his promise to us is to buy time for him to break through to the invincible realm? Li Huaqing raised his eyebrows. I'm not worried about that. Chen Fanqing's tone was cold. On the contrary, I'm looking forward to it. I will continue to reduce the aid to Xianyuan City, and he will stay in prison. This is his promise. If he dares to break it, it means that he officially refuses our proposal. Kunlun City can't satisfy his appetite. What about the heavenly sun? Chen Fanqing said in a low voice. He's ambitious and deserves to be killed. Li Huaqing's body shook slightly. Deserve to be killed? He narrowed his eyes tightly and pondered. Now Emperor Dong's palace is very dangerous. He just doesn't know it. Li Tianlan has potential, but it doesn't mean that Emperor Dong's palace has the strength of the Wang family of Beihai. With the strength of Zhongzhou State, if they really want to attack Emperor Dong's palace, even with Li Tianlan, how long can they hold on? Half a day or a day? If Prime Minister, Li Huaqing suddenly spoke and interrupted Chen Fanqing. Chen Fanqing looked up at him. You're too aggressive, Li Huaqing said in a light tone. Chen Fanqing was stunned. After a long while, he took a deep breath and stopped talking. We all need to calm down, Li Huaqing said. He didn't doubt Chen Fanqing's words. Li Tianlan had great potential. Emperor Dong's palace also had great potential. But if Zhongzhou State really wanted to destroy Emperor Dong's palace, it didn't even need half a day or a day. An hour was enough. The dense missiles could completely cover every corner of Tianan. In a few seconds, Tianan could be turned into purgatory and scorched earth. Under that level of artillery fire, no matter how strong Li Tianlan was, he couldn't survive. It was not a question of whether he could do it or not. It was a question of whether he could do it or not. Zhongzhou State was the most powerful country in the world. But Zhongzhou State didn't belong to the two of them. If the two of them really joined forces, don't forget that the army headquarters was still in the hands of Dongxing Wudi. Chen Fanqing was silent for a while and nodded. You're right. It's not suitable to talk about this topic today. Li Huaqing pushed the teacup forward and said slowly, let's talk about something else. Something else? Chen Fanqing looked at him, a little confused. Let's not talk about Beihai or Emperor Dong's palace. Li Huaqing's eyes were a little complicated. Let's talk about Zhongzhou State. Chapter 807. Li Huaqing wanted to talk about Zhongzhou State with Chen Fanqing. There was no doubt that even in the whole world, the two of them were the most qualified to talk about Zhongzhou State. The afternoon was quiet and heavy. The sunlight outside the window shone in through the window, seeming to soak the waves on the hidden dragon sea. The warm light shone on Li Huaqing's face. His eyes were a little complicated. Chen Fanqing's heart sank slightly. He had never seen Li Huaqing's eyes like this. There were all kinds of complicated emotions in those unfathomable abyss-like eyes. There was anger, regret, disappointment, and coldness. And hesitation. Hesitation. This was the emotion that Chen Fanqing didn't want to see the most. Chen Fanqing's palm shook. The delicate white porcelain teacup collided with the lid, making a harsh sound. His expression gradually became determined, like a rock. How can we not talk about Beihai when talking about Zhongzhou State? Chen Fanqing looked at Li Huaqing's eyes and said slowly. Li Huaqing glanced at him, nodded, and said with a smile, what do you think of the Wang family of Beihai? Meritorious. Chen Fanqing said calmly, but no mistakes are the biggest mistakes. Li Huaqing was silent. No one could deny that. The Wang family of Beihai's contribution to Zhongzhou State was obvious to all. For hundreds of years, the rise of Zhongzhou State at every critical moment almost had the shadow of the Wang family of Beihai. In the beginning, they introduced technology from the West. They attacked Star State. They broke the technical blockade with a relatively neutral identity. They strengthened the diplomatic ties between Zhongzhou State and some Western countries. They contributed their own technology. They supported the construction of Zhongzhou State. For hundreds of years, the Wang family of Beihai shone the most dazzling light in the history of Zhongzhou State. Their contributions didn't need to be detailed, because they couldn't say it. Meritorious. But no mistakes were the biggest mistakes. With the help of the Wang family of Beihai, Zhongzhou State ascended to the position of the world's top power. But as a part of Zhongzhou State, what did Beihai ask of Zhongzhou State? Nothing. There was nothing. The Wang family of Beihai almost never made any request to Zhongzhou State. This behemoth, which had a president and a prime minister and still controlled the Southeast Group, had always been detached from Zhongzhou State, but it was involved in some top-secret plans of Zhongzhou State. Beihai had no requirements for Zhongzhou State, nor did it rely on Zhongzhou State. This meant that they had a lot of choices. In this state, the Wang family of Beihai was like a shadow floating over Zhongzhou State. There was sunshine and glory. But in any case, it could not hide the fact that the Wang family of Beihai was too detached, too domineering, too strong, and too free. Looking down from above. This was Beihai's attitude toward Zhongzhou State for hundreds of years. To put it simply, such a North Sea province could not be controlled. No one in power could control the North Sea province. This feeling of being out of control would make anyone in power restless. No one could imagine how much influence Beihai had on Zhongzhou State. The rise of Zhongzhou State was the growth of Beihai. Almost every group and every person in power in Zhongzhou State had seen a similar model. Or rather, there were different models in different eras. The model simulated the impact on Zhongzhou State if the Wang family of Beihai suddenly collapsed or parted ways with Zhongzhou State. Every model had a different time, so the consequences were different as well. The model contained a large amount of social data. It was densely packed, but the most eye-catching thing was that one line in the model. That was the line that represented the influence of the Wang family of Beihai on Zhongzhou State. The line was green at the beginning, but as time went on, it continued to rise, turning into dark green, light gray, light purple, reddish, and scarlet. 20 years ago, that line had already crossed the highest warning line, turning into a sinister scarlet red that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. The model was highly credible. A large number of sociologists, economists, psychologists, financial professors, politicians, and a large number of analysts were assembled. Every time model was built, it was almost a super large team of thousands of people that analyzed and built it carefully. There was more and more data in the model. The latest model had millions of data. Almost no one knew what these data meant. To put it bluntly, if the Wang family of Beihai suddenly collapsed, or if the Wang family of Beihai broke with Zhongzhou State, the overall economy of Zhongzhou State would collapse at an unimaginable speed. Within a week, more than 400 industries in Zhongzhou State would suffer the first wave of impact. Within a month, the impact would spread to the whole country, and countless industries would be violently shaken. Within half a year, numerous group companies would be forced to go bankrupt. Optimistically, tens of millions of people would lose their jobs, and the social order would be on the verge of collapse. Within a year, the huge social problem would directly become an economic loss that would be unbearable for Zhongzhou State. The national power would decline seriously, and the currency would depreciate or appreciate crazily. In the southeast region, Huading, Wuyue, Jiangzhou, Jianghuai, Jiangnan, Minnan, and other provinces would almost be completely out of control. The political order of Zhongzhou State would also become chaotic. 2 years later, after the first wave of chaos of the Wang family of Beihai passed, Zhongzhou State would face a more severe situation. It was a disaster. It was not a natural disaster. It was a real disaster. This was the current Wang family of Beihai. They had contributed too much, too much, too much. Brilliant, glorious, gorgeous. It was beneficial to Zhongzhou State, but it had become a cancer of Zhongzhou State. Under the current system of Zhongzhou State, such a transcendent force should not have appeared. But in fact, it did exist. The biggest reason was that Beihai was too free. It had no desire for Zhongzhou State, but it showed its influence all the time. In this state, Beihai was very much like Rothschild in Europe at its peak hundreds of years ago, or the Vatican in a more distant time. In fact, there had been a cognition in the dark world hundreds of years ago. Such a cognition was not that the Wang family of Beihai was the strongest force in the dark world. It was about the cognition of the country. 6 major powers in the world: Zhongzhou State, Star State, Germany, Snow Country, England. The 6th, Mount Dibing. Not Beihai Province, not the Wang family of Beihai. It was Mount Dibing. Such a cognition was not only because of the strength of Mount Dibing. It was also because of the almost exaggerated influence of Mount Dibing. In such a case, every person in power would ask himself, was Zhongzhou State the Zhongzhou State of the Zhongzhou State people, or the Zhongzhou State of the Beihai people? No one could tolerate such a thing. The clearest fact was that the countless branches of the Wang family of Beihai had more than one president in hundreds of years. However, almost every president who came from North Sea ended up on bad terms with the Patriarch's faction. What did this mean? Such a superpower should not exist from the perspective of politics, the country, and the situation. They didn't do anything before because there was no chance. There would be twists and turns inside Beihai. There would be changes and turbulence. But they had the Li family with them at that time. The Li family would help them with all the current waves appropriately. They were close to Beihai, but they always maintained a delicate balance. Zhongzhou State couldn't do anything. The real opportunity began more than 20 years ago. The Li family collapsed, and no one would escort Beihai when it was in the most dangerous time. This was the best opportunity. Today, more than 20 years later, the opportunity was fully ripe. The new Li family and Beihai had great grievances. The Lin clan, which was inextricably linked with Beihai, also had cracks with them. Rothschild couldn't take care of himself. The Sword Emperor was missing. Mount Dibing, which had internal and external troubles, became a real isolated island. This was the best opportunity, and it could even be said to be the only opportunity in the long future. Qin Fanqing didn't care about any consequences. He had to take down Mount Dibing. Only Beihai Province, which was completely controlled by Zhongzhou state, would not be a cancer. No one could stop him. Li Tianlan couldn't. Li Huacheng couldn't either. They stood together. Li Huacheng couldn't hesitate at all. The Wang family of Beihai can't be left alive. Chen Fangqing said slowly. His voice was low, and he spoke word by word. Li Huacheng furrowed his brows. Today, Chen Fangqing's killing intent was too heavy. It was as if he was mentally prepared for the worst and intended to be tough to the end. This kind of attitude had completely deviated from their original intentions. He could understand the problem in the other party's mentality, but he couldn't accept it. Prime Minister, as he said, Beihai has contributed to Zhongzhou state. At least now, it seems that their influence is positive, and they haven't caused irreparable disaster to Zhongzhou state. Therefore, we should slow down the Wang family of Beihai. Any drastic action may cause unimaginable serious consequences. Li Huacheng said softly, this may be a matter that will involve years or even decades of planning. As for the plan that would take years or even decades, it was still the same. We have to calm down and plan slowly. We shouldn't make any drastic moves. Otherwise, this matter will deteriorate. Chen Fangqing narrowed his eyes and said blankly, I don't have time. But you do. We're different. He really didn't have time. Next year would be the end of his term. He hoped that this matter could have a clear outline before this time next year, and everyone would remember his achievements. He wanted to leave a clear situation for Zhongzhou state, not a mess. Li Huacheng still had 5 years, but Chen Fangqing really didn't have time. So he persuaded Wang Qinglei. So there was the coming chaos of the Wang family of Beihai. Li Huacheng knew this, but he didn't agree or oppose it. Wang Qinglei persuaded several superpowers. What could they do by sneaking into Beihai? Chaos. They only brought chaos, blood, lives, hatred, and wailing to Beihai, and the opportunity of Zhongzhou state. When several superpowers, many thunder-shocking scriptures, and several invincible realm experts brought unimaginable losses to Beihai, the support of the people of Beihai for Mount Dibbing would naturally decline, and their cohesion would become loose. Zhongzhou state would have the best reason to intervene in Beihai to maintain stability. But such a means was too drastic. Li Huacheng didn't deny that it was effective, but it was not what he liked. But after all, it was not a means of Zhongzhou state to Beihai. It could only be said that the decisive battle between Wang Qinglei and Mount Dibbing was fierce, but at least on the surface, it had nothing to do with Zhongzhou state. So Li Huacheng let the situation develop to this point. But as time went by, Li Huacheng clearly noticed the change of Chen Fangqing's thinking. The Beihai core openly expanded. Wang Xingxiao did not hesitate to fight. Xianyuan city developed rapidly. Li Tianlan obeyed in public, but opposed in private. More and more things beyond his control made Chen Fangqing's thinking gradually go to extremes. Li Huacheng was still thinking about how to control the Wang family of Beihai. But now Chen Fangqing's mind was full of destruction. Destroy the Wang family of Beihai. Destroy Emperor Dong's palace. I understand your urgency, Li Huacheng said softly. But not only Beihai, but also Zhongzhou state can't afford too much risk. I'm the president of Zhongzhou state. Beihai is above me. I don't care about the situation of Beihai, but I have to be responsible for the whole Zhongzhou state. What do you mean? Chen Fangqing raised his head expressionlessly and looked at Li Huacheng. Li Huacheng stood up, walked to the window, and turned his back to Chen Fangqing. I don't think what we're doing now is wrong, but any approach and any plan must be in line with the general trend. The chaos that Beihai is about to face will be the last test of Zhongzhou state. If things really can't be done, compromise may be a better way. You want to compromise? Chen Fangqing abruptly stood up. Beihai is not an enemy, Li Huacheng quietly said. The purpose of a battle is not to kill or be killed. When necessary, both sides need a path of retreat. A Pyrrhic victory is no victory. When the odds of victory are not high, what's the point of being tough? Don't you know how many years Zhongzhou state has prepared for this plan? It's easy to say to give up. In the current situation, how can Zhongzhou state give up? This is a rare opportunity. If we let Beihai take a breather, Beihai's influence on Zhongzhou State will be more obvious in the future. Zhongzhou State is our Zhongzhou State, not the Wang family Zhongzhou State. Do you understand? Chen Fanqing growled, and his face turned red. What you said makes sense, but it's not all right. Li Huacheng said flatly. Zhongzhou State now has Emperor Dong's palace. In the worst case, it's not unacceptable to let Emperor Dong's palace and Beihai form a new balance. You're thinking about defeat before the battle. The president is really farsighted. Chen Fanqing sneered with undisguised sarcasm. We don't have a big chance of winning this game, and Beihai has no chance of winning either. We have our own positions. What's tested is the rationality and wisdom of both sides. We'll try to take something from each other when the other side can accept it. Beihai wants freedom, and we want to control it. Li Huaqing turned to look at Chen Fanqing. But that's all. We don't want war. No one wants war. What this game needs most is rationality. Those who are impulsive, have killing intent, and can't control themselves will end up out. Chen Fanqing narrowed his eyes and kept silent for a long time. The best news is that we're well prepared now. After more than 20 years of planning, we have a big chance of winning. So if possible, we can't give the Wang family of Beihai or Emperor Dong's palace too much time. Chen Fanqing lowered his head and kept silent for a while. Then he slowly said, I'll talk to Wang Qinglei. Have a good talk. Chapter 808. Wang Qinglei sat quietly in his office, listening to the report of an old subordinate of Yu Zhou. Saint, a new invincible realm expert, boarded Wang Shengxiao's plane. As soon as this happened, Wang Qinglei heard about it. When everyone was thinking about the possible meaning behind it, Wang Qinglei was undoubtedly the most uneasy one. However, Wang Shengxiao stayed in Yuzhou for too short a time. Saint was too decisive. So until now, people only knew the news, but they didn't know what happened in that hospital. Is there still no news from the hospital? Wang Qinglei looked at his watch and asked slowly. The person who talked to him on the phone was a deputy mayor of Yuzhou, who was transferred from the position of speaker of a city in Wuyue. He could be regarded as his trusted subordinate. So the other party was very calm about his report, and his questions were very straightforward. No, as Wang Qinglei's old subordinate, Lu Xiao, the deputy mayor of Yuzhou, held the phone with a solemn and serious expression. I've sent someone there, but that hospital is a bit special and is closely watched by the army headquarters. Speaker, this matter is not so simple. I don't think there will be any valuable news in the hospital. The key is the attitude of that person in the desert. He was one of Wang Qinglei's most valued confidants. At the age of 46, he was at the level of deputy governor and the position of deputy mayor of Yuzhou, which was a very valuable position. Such a young age and position matched perfectly. If someone helped him, it was very likely that he would rise rapidly. Wang Qinglei was undoubtedly his benefactor. He was very clear about the estrangement between the speaker and the Southeast group. More clearly, if the speaker could win, he would be rewarded according to his contributions in the future. After a year, he was very likely to go further. Even if he couldn't be promoted in Yuzhou, it was very likely that he would be sent to serve as the governor of a province. And if Wang Qinglei failed as a confidant, Lu Xiao would not have a good end. The facts were in front of him. He naturally had to do his best for the things that the old leader cared about. Wang Qinglei snorted softly and rubbed his tightly frowned eyebrows. The attitude of that person in the desert? He smiled bitterly and somewhat self-deprecatingly. No matter what the attitude of that person was, it was not something he could influence. Lu Xiao heard Wang Qinglei's bitter smile, hesitated, and continued, Speaker, don't forget that you're also a member of the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Qinglei was stunned. He narrowed his eyes and said, What are you trying to say? You're the most important figure in the Wang family of Beihai. If you win this game, you'll be the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai in the future. Now what Mount Dibbing can give to that person, you might be able to. Lu Xiao remained calm and collected. After a brief silence, Wang Qinglei let out a long breath and calmly said, Let's call it a day. Pay more attention to the hospital and look for me if there's any problem. Lucio smiled, nodded, and hung up the phone. Wang Qinglei stood up and paced around his office. After thinking for a while, he picked up his phone and called Chun Fanqing. The phone rang twice before it was hung up. At this time, Chun Fanqing, who had received the news, should be discussing with Li Huaqing. Wang Qinglei returned to his desk, dealt with a few documents, and waited silently. More than an hour later, his phone suddenly rang. Wang Qinglei answered the phone calmly. "Hello, Prime Minister." "Yes, Comrade Qinglei. Are you looking for me?" On the phone, Chun Fanqing's voice was steady and calm. His mentality might be a little unbalanced, but compared with Wang Qinglei, who had no way out, Chun Fanqing still had the right to control him. Wang Qinglei smiled and said in a deep voice, "What do you think of Saint's actions, Prime Minister?" Chun Fanqing did not speak. Whether this is the test of Emperor Dong's palace or the decision of Emperor Dong's palace, Li Tianlan's wild ambition has undoubtedly been exposed. "Prime Minister, I think we must take action." Wang Qinglei continued. "What do you think?" Chun Fanqing asked slowly after a moment of silence. "I think we should pay a proper visit to Minister Dongcheng." Wang Qinglei said without hesitation, "Not only Minister Dongcheng Wudi, but also Minister Dongcheng Hongguan. In addition, we need a clear attitude from the four spirit generals of Zhongzhou State, Gongsun Qi, Yi, Li Wangsheng, and even Sai City, all the organizations that keep close ties with Emperor Dong's palace. They can be close to Li Tianlan, but they can't forget their responsibilities in Zhongzhou State." "Go on," Chun Fanqing said with no fluctuation in his voice. "In addition, I need the full cooperation of Zhongzhou State." Wang Qinglei continued. Yuzhou, Hidden Dragon Sea. In the Prime Minister's office, Chun Fanqing narrowed his eyes and his voice was a little gloomy. "Full cooperation? Activate all the forces of Zhongzhou State left in Beihai." Wang Qinglei's voice was decisive and ruthless. "There's no time. I can't afford the slightest risk now. I personally think Li Tianlan hasn't made up his mind yet. Saint's going to Beihai may be a test of Emperor Dong's palace, or he has made up his mind but hasn't invested resources. Anyway, we have to show him Zhongzhou State's determination to take Beihai, show him the power of Zhongzhou State, and the consequences of going against the will of Zhongzhou State. I suggest using all the chess pieces of Zhongzhou State left in Beihai, cooperate with the Vatican and East Island, and stir up the greatest chaos as soon as possible before Li Tianlan makes up his mind." Chun Fanqing's body tensed quietly for a moment, and he didn't speak. "There's no time." Wang Qinglei said blandly, "Don't say that Zhongzhou State doesn't have enough power in Beihai. It's impossible. Prime Minister, when you came to me, it was 15 years ago. At that time, I was still a deputy governor of Wuyue, not even a director of Wuyue. You were already prepared at that time. If I'm not wrong, when the Li family collapsed more than 20 years ago, you started to operate. But at that time, it was not you and President Li Huaqing who were responsible for these things. After more than 20 years of planning, I'm looking forward to how powerful Zhongzhou State is hiding in Beihai. I personally think our current strength is enough." Chun Fanqing was silent for a long time, and then said slowly, "I don't deny that what you said makes sense, but I can't give you an answer on this matter for a while." He was telling the truth. Zhongzhou State started to plan this more than 20 years ago. At that time, neither he nor Li Huaqing was in the position now. In order to activate all the forces, they had to visit some retired but still had great influence. Only when everyone united their thoughts could they exert the most powerful combat effectiveness. Wang Qinglei said yes, and said, "I will persuade the Vatican and East Island." "Okay." Chun Fanqing nodded and suddenly said, "If this plan is passed in Zhongzhou State, Beihai will inevitably be in chaos." "How chaotic do you want Beihai to be?" Wang Qinglei was stunned. He didn't seem to think about this. He held the phone and thought about it for a long time before he laughed. His smile was elegant and gentle, but there was madness in his eyes. "Turn the world upside down." He held the phone and said calmly. Chapter 809. Wang Qinglei's voice was clear and steady. It was because of the clarity that Chun Fanqing could clearly feel the depression and madness in his voice. This kind of emotion was so strong that it seemed to hit Chun Fanqing across the phone. It was so heavy that Chun Fanqing felt a little suffocated. To turn the Wang family of Beihai upside down. Even if he was the prime minister of Zhongzhou State, he couldn't imagine what it would be like. But there was no doubt that it was indeed the picture he had been looking forward to for a long time. Now it seemed that Wang Qinglei seemed to be crazier than they thought. Chun Fanqing was a little relieved. He was also a little shocked. The plan did start a long time ago. In the first moment after the collapse of the Li family, the top leadership of Zhongzhou State had begun to operate secretly. Wang Qinglei was not the first candidate they chose. Before this, they'd even vaguely tried to contact Wen Siyuan, but they were all rejected. Moreover, he didn't give them any leeway. Even the current two giants of the Southeast group, they had secretly probed them before. The repeated failures did not make Zhongzhou State give up the idea. In fact, the continuous growth of the Wang family of Beihai had reached the point where Zhongzhou State had to try its best to weaken it. They had no choice, just like the Wang family of Beihai was destined not to compromise. Therefore, although the leaders of that session did not choose a satisfactory spokesperson, they took advantage of the chaos of the Li family, the turmoil of the Southeast group, and the silence of Beihai to place a large number of chess pieces in Beihai. These chess pieces quietly took root in Beihai, involving various fields, the Southeast group and the Beihai core. Then it was another leader's effort. The chess pieces scattered in Beihai grew strong and grew, but they still did not choose a good spokesperson. In the middle of that session, Wang Qinglei appeared in everyone's sight. His age and his ability made him attract a lot of people's attention at the first time. At that time, Wang Qinglei was like the current Wang Jingxin. He was low-key and gentle, but extremely dazzling in the eyes of those who cared about him. This time, the contact was unexpectedly smooth. The two sides almost hit it off. Wang Qinglei passed all the tests and inspections. In the past 10 years, every heavyweight of the Southeast group had something to do with Wang Qinglei's behind-the-scenes operation. Similarly, every time Wang Qinglei was promoted with the support of the Southeast group, it also had something to do with the academics and the Prince group. What surprised Chun Fanqing and others most was that Wang Qinglei actually drew Wang Xiaoyao to his side. They didn't trust Wang Xiaoyao at first. The lineal descendant of Mount Dibbing was either a single lineal descendant or a brother or a sister or a brother and sister. For hundreds of years, the brothers who occupied the position of patriarch in Mount Dibbing had never betrayed the clan. Wang Xiaoyao could be said to be the first case. Until now, Wang Xiaoyao had done a lot of things in secret. Even so, Chun Fanqing was still a little wary of him and did not pull Wang Xiaoyao into the core circle of their conspiracy against Beihai. But it had to be admitted that as Wang Xiaoyao approached Wang Qinglei, the two of them joined forces and the arrangement inside Beihai province became easier. Today, the power of Wang Qinglei and Wang Xiaoyao, the power of the Vatican, East Island, the Jiang family of South America, and the power of Zhongzhou State. Adding everything together, they already had enough power to shake the foundation of the North Sea. That was why Wang Qinglei said he wanted to turn the North Sea province upside down. Confident and crazy. "What do you need from me?" Chun Fanqing was silent for a moment before he slowly said, "Give us enough credit." Wang Qinglei said. Chun Fanqing frowned. "You should know that we have never doubted you. Maybe we had an investigation before, but after so many years of cooperation, no one will doubt your position and determination." "I mean us," Wang Qinglei said blandly. "You mean Wang Xiaoyao?" Chun Fanqing narrowed his eyes. He is not only Wang Tianzong's younger brother, but also an invincible realm expert. At present, His Majesty, Moraid, Jiangguochu, Tianhai Wuji, and Yagyu Kurumi. On the surface, we have 5 invincible realm experts. And there is another invincible realm expert in the dark, who is the only invincible realm killer in the dark world. 6 people. This kind of strength is very strong. But facing the Wang family of Beihai, no one dares to say that we are 100% sure. If Li Tianlan joins forces with the Wang family of Beihai, who knows to what extent Li Tianlan's strength will be? Who knows to what extent the strength of Saint will be? Who is sure that the Dark Knights will not intervene? Who is sure that the Lin clan will stay out of it? There are too many variables in this matter. Pulling Wang Xiaoyao into this circle can only be good. Wang Qinglei said. He is just one person. What can he change? Chen Fanqing didn't take it seriously. Don't underestimate Wang Xiaoyao. Wang Qinglei laughed in a low voice. On the surface, although he just entered the Invincible Realm last year, in fact, no one knows when he broke through the Invincible Realm. Maybe he alone can stop Li Tianlan. If Zhongzhou State warns Mount Shu, Saint can't act rashly. In Northern Europe, it has been a bit lively recently. Wang Xiaoyao and His Majesty can join forces in Northern Europe and make trouble in Northern Europe so that Flaming Fire can't get away. In the Lin clan, Wang Xiaoyao can also use the resources in his hands to join forces with the Jiang family of South America. They target the branch of the Lin clan in South America, and Lin Fengting will be busy with his own affairs. Do you understand? Wang Xiaoyao can play a key role in this chaos. Not to mention these, we can't ignore his own combat capability. He has been working with me for many years, but he has never entered this circle. Your concerns will also become his concerns. Chen Fanqing held the phone and didn't speak for a long time. Trust Wang Xiaoyao. He always felt that something was wrong, but there was no reason to doubt what Wang Xiaoyao had done in the past few years. The main reason was his identity. He was Wang Tianzong's younger brother. They had the same father and mother. I've always wondered why Wang Xiaoyao would betray Wang Tianzong with his identity. Chen Fanqing asked. He had raised this question, but Wang Qinglei's explanation was not thorough enough. Because of his name, Wang Xiaoyao. Wang Tianzong's original intention was to let him be King Xiaoyao for a lifetime, the kind without power. But who would be willing to do so? Wang Tianzong is so dazzling. He was suppressed too much by my brother's side. That's it. Chen Fanqing shook his head subconsciously. Wang Qinglei was silent for a moment and continued. It also has something to do with Qin Weibai. Chen Fanqing paused slightly, narrowed his eyes, and whispered, What do you mean? Wang Xiaoyao likes Qin Weibai. Wang Qinglei's voice was low. He doesn't pretend to like her. He really likes her. That kind of love and affection you may not be able to imagine. It can even be said that he thinks about her day and night. Wang Qinglei smiled. As far as I know, before Li Tianlan appeared, Wang Xiaoyao personally begged Wang Tianzong, hoping that Wang Tianzong would personally propose marriage to Samsara Palace. The conditions he offered were too outrageous, so Wang Tianzong refused. The two brothers quarreled for a long time. It is said that Wang Xiaoyao even knelt down, but Wang Tianzong never agreed. Later, Wang Tianzong met Qin Weibai once. It is said that he wanted Qin Weibai to marry Wang Shengxiao. Obviously, a woman like Qin Weibai is very suitable to be the hostess of the Wang family of Beihai. Her role is even greater than that of Summer Solstice. There is no need to elaborate the details, but everything should be true. I think the estrangement between the two brothers began at that time. Wang Xiaoyao also began to test me at that time and gave me preliminary cooperation. Later, when Li Tianlan appeared, Wang Xiaoyao and Wang Tianzong lost their thoughts. So, Chen Fanqing's face softened. For a woman, Qin Weibai is not an ordinary woman. Wang Qinglei said lightly. Chen Fanqing was silent. Qin Weibai was indeed not an ordinary woman. Her perfection was from the inside out, from appearance to thought. In the eyes of outsiders, she was absolutely a perfect, almost evil, or even terrible woman. If this kind of woman did not have Li Tianlan and wanted to take advantage of her own advantages, she definitely had the potential to ruin the country and the people. The first beauty of Zhongzhou State. Chen Fanqing had also heard of this title. But the funny thing was that the so-called first beauty of Zhongzhou State did not even have a nationality of Zhongzhou State. And the most important point, Wang Qinglei continued, in the content of my cooperation with Wang Xiaoyao, if we finally overthrow Mount Dibbing, The new patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai will be him, not me. Chun Fangqing's body shook, and all the doubts in his heart seemed to be relieved in an instant. He smiled and said slowly, "Are you willing to do that?" Wang Qinglei also smiled and did not speak. Chapter 8:10. When Yu Chunguang walked into Wang Qinglei's office, there was dead silence in the office. As the owner, Wang Qinglei sat on the chair quietly and looked at the ceiling. He was as silent as a statue. "Something on your mind?" Yu Chunguang smiled and asked casually. As the two biggest rebels of the Southeast group, the relationship between Speaker Wu Yue and the governor could no longer be described as harmonious. It was clear that the fate of the two had been firmly intertwined. For this reason, the difference between the duties of the governor and the speaker had become extremely blurred between the two. Under the overwhelming pressure from the outside world, the two who held Wu tightly in their hands were like true confidants, and there was no longer any courtesy between them. Wang Qinglei opened his eyes, glanced at him, and shook his head silently. This movement was simple and pure. It did not mean to deny, but it showed endless exhaustion. This was the Wang Qinglei in Yu Chunguang's eyes. In the eyes of the Southeast group, he had wild ambitions. In the eyes of the Wang family of Beihai, he was unforgivable. In the eyes of Chun Fangqing, Li Huaqing, and others, he was crazy and extreme. In the hearts of many cadres of Wu Yue, he was deep and unpredictable. Different people had different Wang Qinglei in their hearts. In Yu Chunguang's eyes, Wang Qinglei was just a bearer who was about to be completely crushed by the huge pressure. He had not been the governor of Wu Yue for a long time, but when he was in contact with Wang Qinglei in private, he had always been like this. Wang Qinglei knew that there might be some factors that wanted to lower his and Wang Xiaoyao's guard, but he also knew that during this period of time, these years, and even these years, Wang Qinglei did not have a good time. Years of secret arrangements and plans were exposed little by little, and Wang Qinglei completely appeared in everyone's sight. In the crucial change of office only 1 year, the slightest movement in Zhongzhou State was enough to make Wang Qinglei highly nervous. "It's okay." Yu Chunguang sat down, as if to comfort him, but his tone was calm and confident. "It's just that Saint went to Mount Dibbing. It doesn't mean that he will cooperate with the Wang family of Beihai. It's just a possibility. We don't have to be so nervous. How could it be so simple?" Wang Qinglei shook his head, and his voice was a little hoarse. "Even if they really join hands, it's nothing." Yu Chunguang said, "Li Tianlan is indeed very strong, but he is not as strong as the rumors say. He is now the #1 expert in the dark world besides Lin Fengting. If he really dares to appear in Beihai, Xiaoyao can stop him. As for the other invincible realm experts who are related to him, you can handle the foreign ones, and Xiaoyao can handle the domestic ones. In terms of pure strength, we still have the absolute upper hand." Wang Qinglei thought about it, smiled bitterly, and lit a cigarette. "That's true, but when I think about it carefully, I still feel a little uneasy. I don't know where the problem is, or if I'm too worried about gains and losses." He took a deep drag on the cigarette, exhaled the smoke bit by bit, and said softly, "We can't afford to lose." Yu Chunguang was silent for a moment, then nodded. He was indeed a sore loser. Wang Qinglei couldn't afford to lose. He could not afford to lose either. There is no doubt that he came to Wu Yue at great risk, or it could be said that he came to Wu Yue purely because of his friendship with Wang Xiaoyao. He used to be the mayor of Huading. In the eyes of most people, the mayor of a municipality serving as the governor of a province was definitely not a promotion, especially when Yu Chunguang was the core of the Southeast group. It was impossible for ordinary people to sit in the position of mayor of Huading. The Southeast group sent him here to prepare to regain the supreme power of Huading. However, Yu Chunguang chose Wu Yue, which directly caused the Southeast group to be forced to give up the plan to take over Huading, or at least to postpone the plan for several years. He gave up the position of Zhongzhou State Councilor and Speaker of Huading. It was for the position of Zhongzhou State Councilor and Speaker of Wu Yue. If Wang Qinglei could go up next year, this position could only be his. This was the balance between Wang Qinglei and Wang Xiaoyao. Yu Chengguang played the core role. Only when he completely controlled Wu Yue could Wang Xiaoyao control the Wang family of Beihai in the future. If Wang Qinglei couldn't go up, Yu Chengguang would also lose the opportunity to enter the Zhongzhou State Parliament. Standing in this position, under the current situation, he and Wang Qinglei were facing the same situation. They were either soaring up the sky or falling straight into the abyss. Don't be too nervous. Yu Chengguang was silent for a while, shook his head, and said softly, "It is very likely that the several invincible realm experts related to Li Tianlan will not participate in this matter. Li Tianlan is also so powerful that he makes people desperate. One more person won't affect the overall situation." Wang Qinglei nodded, muttered, and said slowly, "At present, it seems so." He shook his head again. "Anyway, the sooner the chaos happens, the better. A long night is fraught with trouble. I can't afford to delay it." Xiaoyao also means the same. Yu Chengguang said slowly. According to him, Mount Dibbing seems to have found something abnormal. At present, the work of investigating foreign forces is much more careful than before. They should have noticed something. It's too late. Wang Qinglei twitched the corner of his mouth, revealing a sneer. The little guy is still too inexperienced. When it came to the core members of the Wang family of Beihai, even if they were standing on the opposite side, Yu Chengguang still didn't say anything. "I don't want to wait anymore," Wang Qinglei said. "They say that we need to be fully prepared. Hey, in fact, there is no such thing as complete. For me, half of the certainty is enough to take a gamble." I just talked to the Prime Minister on the phone. In principle, the Prime Minister agreed to use the power of Zhongzhou State in Beihai. But I still need to communicate with other comrades to make a final decision, especially some old comrades. I will be in Yuzhou during this period. You should pay more attention to Wu Yue. If there is anything, you can contact me and we will discuss it. Yu Chengguang narrowed his eyes, nodded, and said with a smile, "Okay, have a safe trip." Wang Qinglei said yes and continued. "In addition, we need to inform Xiaoyao. If we are right, the girl Yuedong is the key to the successful cooperation between the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace. We'd better find her." "How can it be so easy?" Yu Chengguang shook his head. "Little princess has only been familiar with a few places since she was child. Beihai, Yuzhou, Wuyue, Huading. She has searched everywhere, but there is no news at all. Zhongzhou State is so big. If she wants to hide, finding her is as difficult as finding a needle in a haystack. Anyway, we still have to try," Wang Qinglei said. "As for Wu Yue, organize an investigation in the near future." Yu Chengguang nodded and didn't say anything. He suddenly asked, "Whose idea is it to find little princess? Yours? Or the Prime Minister?" "It's the Council's idea," Wang Qinglei said calmly. Yu Chengguang said yes, and his eyes were a little cold. Chapter 8:11. It was not the first time for Saint to come to Mount Dibbing. Whether as the Swordmaster of Mount Shu or as the Supermaster of Samsara Palace, he had been here more than once. But this time was undoubtedly the best treatment he had ever received. Wang Xingxiao was well prepared in this regard. No one knew that Saint was here to take the coldness of 9 states, but everyone knew that Saint was here on behalf of Emperor Dong's palace. In this way, the Wang family of Beihai would not be too exaggerated in any way. The more ostentatious it was, the more close the relationship between the two sides could be shown, and the more it could make some people who were secretly ready to make trouble inside and outside the parliament worry. Mount Dibbing, which had been split by a sword, had been repaired a lot by the Wang family of Beihai regardless of the cost. At least it was no longer ugly. The mountain and the foot of the mountain had become green and brilliant again. The large construction site at the top of the mountain had been reduced to almost non-existence, but some details still needed to be adjusted and repaired. The helicopter landed directly on the tarmac at the top of Mount Dibbing. One by one, The important figures who played important roles in Beihai had begun to line up to greet them. A little farther away, the elites of the internal defense forces of the Wang family of Beihai were lining up. The full Heaven Punishment Troop stood on the other side. Firmament, Enchantress, Xian Ming, and other well-known experts in the Dark World stood on the other side of the Heaven Punishment Troop. The patriarchs of the 7 major sword-holding families of Beihai Province had all arrived. The sun was shining on Mount Dibing, but it was silent. A solemn and chilling atmosphere surrounded the entire top of the mountain, iron-blooded and powerful. Saint got off the plane and watched all this silently. He did not think that the Wang family of Beihai wanted to scare him. But there was no doubt that at such a critical moment, the Wang family of Beihai was showing its strength to make those who cooperated with them feel at ease. Saint's eyes turned and finally fell on a woman. It was a woman who looked to be in her 40s. She was middle-aged, but her body was not bloated. Instead, she was extremely tall. She was about 1.9 meters tall and had a moderate figure. Her appearance was not considered beautiful. A shallow scar extended from her face to the back of her ear. She stood there quietly, motionless. Next to her, slightly behind her, were Firmament and Enchantress. Saint narrowed his eyes. He had never seen this woman. There was no such woman in the information of Samsara Palace. As if sensing Saint's gaze, the woman lifted her head and glanced at him before nodding slightly. Saint was expressionless, but the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. He took a deep look at the man and asked, "Who is that?" "She's Phoenix." Wang Shengxiao smiled and said softly, "My aunt." After a pause, he added, "Kiss Ani." Saint's pupils suddenly contracted. "Kiss my aunt?" Which also meant, was she Xia Ji's biological sister? Phoenix. Saint had never heard of this name, nor had he heard of this code name, but he could clearly feel how powerful this person was. She just stood there quietly, but her faintly discernible aura seemed to cover Mount Dibing. It was obscure, but extremely strong and blazing. That kind of aura was not deliberately aimed at Saint, but it made him feel a clear sense of oppression. The other party was very strong. Even in the eyes of an invincible realm expert, the other party was probably incredibly strong. This kind of strength and sharpness had almost surpassed the so-called realm. It was not the first time Saint had seen such a person. There were also such people in Zhongzhou State, and there was more than one. Li Tianlan in this state was one of them. Tribulation before the chaos in Eastern Europe was also one of them. Saint took a deep breath, glanced at the direction of the woman, and slowly said, "Sorry for my disrespect." The two sides were hundreds of meters apart. Phoenix slightly raised her head and glanced at him. Her body moved. The next second, she had come directly to Saint. At that moment, in Saint's perception, it was like a beast suddenly pouncing on him. In an instant, the sword intent surged all over Saint's body. The bright sunlight seemed to be twisted around him for a moment, and countless sword energy were fighting. It was all out of instinct. He took a step forward as if he was about to make a move. The woman froze and took another step back, indicating that she had no malice. Saint took a deep breath, suppressed the sword energy, and shook his head. "Sorry," he whispered, "my realm is not stable. I'm a little impolite." "Very strong." Phoenix's eyes lit up completely. "I heard that he is a new invincible realm expert in Zhongzhou State. If you're not busy, let's have a fight." "Annie, he came here to take away a very important thing for the person in Emperor Dawn's palace, not to fight." Wang Shengxiao smiled bitterly. "The one in the desert?" Phoenix slightly raised her eyebrows and thought for a moment. "In a year, if he has grown up, I should not be his opponent." Wang Shengxiao did not speak. Phoenix took another look at Saint. "Let's have a fight." She used a declarative sentence. "Not today." Saint was a little regretful. "I'm in a hurry to go back." Phoenix said, "I'm not interested in the cooperation between you. Whether Emperor Dawn's palace and Beihai are enemies or friends, as long as they don't provoke me, I won't intervene. Leave an address, and I'll find it when things here are over." Her words were a little contradictory, and she was extremely straightforward. Saint was a little confused. Annie came here to wait for second uncle. Except for second uncle, she won't care about anything in Beihai. Wang Shengxiao sighed and said softly. Saint suddenly nodded to show that he understood. Many people in Zhongzhou State knew that Summer Solstice's family had a complicated relationship with Mount Dibbing. Summer Solstice married Wang Tianzong and was dead set on him. Everyone thought that this matter was over. But if Phoenix was Summer Solstice's younger sister, then she naturally had no good feelings for Mount Dibbing. But why did she come here to deal with Wang Xiaoyao? Saint recalled the information about Samsara Palace again, but he could not find any clues. He could only temporarily suppress his doubts. Anyway, Phoenix's arrival could be regarded as adding a top combat force to Mount Dibbing. Even if she was only responsible for dealing with Wang Xiaoyao, her role could not be ignored. What realm is it? Saint asked slowly. Ice condensing mirror. Phoenix's tone was calm and natural. Chi controlling, ice condensing, fire flaming, thunder shocking. Invincible. Saint froze for a while and finally laughed. He seemed to think this matter was very interesting. Okay. He nodded and said, "This is my phone number. When this matter is over, you can come to Yuzhou to find me." Phoenix nodded and turned to leave. Saint narrowed his eyes and looked around again. Only then did he find that at this time on Mount Dibbing, there were some relatively strange or completely strange faces. The so-called relatively strange refer to the fact that they had never appeared on Mount Dibbing before, but they existed in the secret database of Emperor Dong's palace. And completely strange meant that they were really completely strange. There was no doubt that the Wang family of Beihai had been fully prepared to deal with the upcoming chaos. Saint looked around and whispered to himself, "There's still one less invincible realm expert." What invincible realm? Wang Xingxiao was a little confused. Nothing. Saint smiled and said, "Let's go and get the sword." Chapter 8:12. The black blade of coldness of 9 states shone with a dark luster under the bright light. All the staff in the laboratory had left early. Not long after the ultra-high temperature furnace went out, the empty hall was silent and scorching. The 2 halves of the divine weapon were placed on a huge platform. It was deep and heavy. It was quiet. It was a little cold, even desolate. Saint's palm slowly touched the cold blade. The sword intent of coldness of 9 states seemed to resonate with his palm, but it was a little slow and looked weak. Saint's eyes were a little regretful or pitiful. What a pity! Winner takes all. Wang Shengxiao stood beside him, calm and emotionless. Saint nodded and then shook his head. He looked at coldness of 9 states, narrowed his eyes slightly, and whispered, "How about coming with me?" Coldness of 9 states already had its own will. Perhaps it was not as smart as Xianyuan Feng and could not express its emotions, but strictly speaking, it was also alive now, just a little ignorant. Saint gently tapped on the blade of coldness of 9 states and whispered, "I'll take you to find the other you." The blade of coldness of 9 states suddenly shook. An indistinct emotion spread out from the sword. There was some hesitation, some reluctance, and some yearning. After all, swords and people were different. People might need some other things to understand what Xianyuan Feng was. But the ignorant coldness of 9 states would not. In Eastern Europe, when the 2 swords collided in an instant, it could already understand that it was another version of itself, a more complete version of itself. It was cut off by the other version of itself. Saint looked at it quietly, feeling its reluctance, and didn't say anything. He didn't know if it was the same when the Wang family of Beihai handed coldness of 9 states to Dongxing Huangtu for the first time many years ago or many years later. But any life longed for completeness and freedom. So he didn't say anything more and waited quietly. Crack! In the clear sound of collision, the 2 broken blades of coldness of 9 states collided slightly and seemed to have made a decision. The 2 blades moved slightly towards Saint and quickly shrank. Saint held out his palm. Coldness of 9 states, which had become extremely soft, wrapped Saint's finger and spread all the way up, finally turning into a black arm guard. Saint lowered his head and touched the arm guard, feeling a little happy. He turned around and looked at Wang Shengxiao. "Are you leaving after dinner?" Wang Shengxiao smiled calmly. He seemed to be emotionless, but at the same time, he seemed to be suppressing all his emotions. From this moment on, the first murderous weapon that had accompanied the Wang family of Beihai for hundreds of years left the Wang family of Beihai. In its long life in the future, it would accompany another chosen one. This fact was bloody for everyone in the Wang family of Beihai. But Wang Shengxiao didn't show anything. For the first time, Saint sensed an unfathomable shrewdness from the new patriarch of North Sea. This was something that even Li Tianlan did not have. A hint of wariness flashed across his eyes, and he shook his head. "No need," he said softly. "I'm in a hurry to go back. I can't leave the hospital for too long." Wang Shengxiao was silent for a moment and nodded. "All right." He gestured for Saint to leave with him and asked softly, "How are the injuries of the two princes?" Since they were cooperating, Saint didn't mind revealing some information. He shook his head and said, "Not very good. Today, many wounded people from the chaos in Eastern Europe were still living in the hospital he guarded. More than a year had passed, and some people had left the hospital, such as Gong Sun-chi and E of the Four Spirit Generals. Black Tortoise would also leave the hospital in the near future. In the hospital he guarded, the two people with the most serious injuries were also the two with the strongest strength. Tribulation. Li Shi. Their injuries still did not improve. So far in the battle in Eastern Europe, the two were still in a deep coma, and there was no improvement. Li Shi's position was unclear. If Tribulation could wake up, the first expert in the dark world might not be Lin Fengting. Now, an invincible realm killer with the code name Ju had become the top killer in the dark world and stood at the top. If Tribulation could wake up and recover, no one could imagine how terrible a super assassin who had crossed the boundary of the peak of the invincible realm would be. Wang Shengxiao nodded. Hearing the news, he didn't know whether his mood was good or bad. The helicopter on the tarmac was on standby after being resupplied. Saint shook hands with Wang Shengxiao and didn't say much. He boarded the helicopter and left Mount Dibbing directly. Next, he would go to Zhongyuan to deliver the coldness of 9 states, and then return to Yuzhou as fast as possible to guard those seriously injured people standing beside Li Tianlan. Wang Shengxiao, stood on the tarmac and looked up at the helicopter taking off. It went farther and farther in the air and finally became a small black dot. He didn't speak for a long time. Without a sound, the tall phoenix walked over. Her footsteps were as light as a large cat's. "This man is very strong." She looked up at the direction where the helicopter left and said slowly, "How can the deputy palace master of Emperor Dong's palace not be strong?" Wang Shengxiao said quietly, "According to our analysis, although he is over 40 years old, he is still very likely to step into the peak of the invincible realm. His foundation is too stable." Phoenix nodded and said yes. "Did he take the coldness of 9 states?" Phoenix asked. Wang Shengxiao said yes. "He took the murderous weapon, Human Emperor." She repeated it again. Wang Shengxiao's eyebrows moved, and he said yes again. "Huh." Phoenix laughed and said with some sarcasm, "The Wang family of Beihai is really a big family." Wang Shengxiao didn't say anything. "Everyone is worried about the future of Beihai. I don't think there is anything to worry about." Phoenix sneered slightly. "How can such a big family business collapse in an instant? You are now the patriarch of Beihai. Today you send Human Emperor, tomorrow you send the troops of all heavens. The day after tomorrow you send the immortality potion, and if you can't, send half of Beihai. There's a long time in the future, and Beihai is so big." Wang Shengxiao frowned suddenly, looked at Phoenix, and said slowly, "Who told you that I'm sending the family business? I don't need someone to tell me." Phoenix said faintly, "That's the truth. No matter how big the foundation of Beihai is, it is impossible to disdain murderous weapons. If you tell me the Human Emperor is not the family business of the Wang family of Beihai, I will believe it. Even if you say that you have 10,000 Human Emperors, I will believe it, as long as you believe it yourself. I'm very happy to see Beihai like this." She turned slowly. "But I still feel sorry for my sister. The Wang family of Beihai doesn't need anyone to feel sorry for her or pity her." Wang Shengxiao said softly, "Of course, The Wang family of Beihai won't have 10,000 human emperors. But you're right about one thing. The Wang family of Beihai is indeed a big family business. He looked at Phoenix's back and said faintly, I can give human emperor because the Wang family of Beihai has something better than human emperor. Aunt, why don't you understand such a simple truth? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.